entering the unscientific. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 26 Fateful Encounter. The emergence of Han, Tai, Li, expansion was like a blessing from heaven to Xiaoniu. While solving the simplified expansion form of Mn in the case of non-integer, it also opened a new door for him. Therefore, in the next 2 days, Xiaoniu hardly left the house and kept optimizing the relevant formulas. Indeed, this time was not enough for Xiaoniu to systematically define infinitesimal. After all, according to history, this concept would not be formally proposed in writing until 1704, and acceleration would not break through the wall overnight. But in addition to this, Xiaoniu also optimized some other representations, for example, using a 1/2 to replace a, using a1 to replace 1/a, and so on. This change of symbols has long been commonplace for people in later generations, but in this era when exponents are still very unfamiliar, this change of representation is an extremely bold operation. After Xiaoniu generalizes the general analysis of finite-term equations to infinite expressions, it will not be long before he can formally derive the formula of universal gravitation. In addition, during these days, Su Yun became a food delivery man. After Xiaoniu entered the state, he simply forgot to eat and sleep. Once, if Su Yun hadn't been watching, Xiaoniu would have really drunk the Inca's boiling water. But on the other hand, Su Yun's efforts were not in vain. Although there was no prompt for the completion of the task, Xiaoniu had gradually begun to recognize Su Yun's ability. He occasionally chatted with Su Yun, and the discussion was still some mathematical problems. You know, Xiaoniu's full name is Isaac, small I, resentful woman, Newton. In his eyes, humans are basically divided into mentally retarded and somewhat mentally retarded. In addition to delivering food, Su Yun mainly wandered around outside in his free time, thinking about what to do next. Although it feels a bit inappropriate without a mobile phone, Su Yun has also experienced such days. He got his doctorate in biology in this life by hard work, and he has long been accustomed to hanging out in the library. In addition, Su Yun also found a good fishing spot by the small river not far from Xiaoniu's home, and made a pair of lure rods with his good hands-on ability. When he was bored, he would go out and cast a few rods, and time would slowly pass by. In these 2 days, Su Yun caught a worn-out boot, a rotten squirrel corpse, shot down a sparrow, caught a snake, and caught a pair of cheating lovers, but he didn't catch any fish. As a fisherman, those who know will know. In this way, 2 days passed in a flash. Early in the morning of the 3rd day, Su Yun woke up from the bed on time and walked out of the bedroom as usual. As a result, as soon as he opened the door, he saw Xiaoniu sitting at the round table, fixing his hair in front of the mirror in a rather showy manner, wearing the formal school uniform of Cambridge College. Su Yun blinked when he saw this. Mr. Newton, what are you doing? After the reader's correction, Xiaoniu should be called Mr. Newton. Newton is his last name. He has the same name as his father. The English name is indeed my shortcoming. As for William, I won't change it, or two. Xiaoniu first picked up a hairpin from the table and fixed his wig in front of the mirror, then raised his eyelids and looked at him. Today is Sunday. Have you forgotten Uncle William's invitation? Su Yun was stunned at first, and then suddenly slapped his head. Oh, I remember, going to church, right? Xiaoniu nodded and put on a solemn expression. You also come over to tidy up your manners. Worship should be neat and tidy. Fearing God is the beginning of wisdom, and knowing the Holy One is wisdom. Su Yun muttered silently, then why don't you take a shower? But on the surface, he still obediently did it. After all, faith is a fatal weakness of Xiaoniu and his core spiritual sustenance. There is no need to argue about anything in the idealistic field. The modern mirror was not invented by Liebig until 1835. At that time, the mirror was mainly made of tin foil and mercury coated on the back of the glass, and it was also very clear. 3 days later, including the day when Su Yun first traveled through time, Su Yun's face had become visibly sallow. He didn't know whether it was a body or a soul travel. The latter was easy to say, but if it was the former, Su Yun would probably have to consider gaining weight when he returned to reality. Then he took a comb and simply tidied his hair, and followed Xiaoniu to pick up the Holy Bible and left the house. Woolsthorpe is just a very ordinary village, So if you want to go to church, you have to walk to Grantham, 7 miles away. Grantham in the 21st century has long become a city, but at this time Grantham is just a small town with more than 3,000 people, but this town will become a feng shui treasure land in a sense in the future. In addition to Xiaoniu, the Iron Lady, Mrs. Thatcher, also came from here. In 1665, there was only one church in Grantham, located in the southwest of the town, and the name of the church was St. Titus Dia. In 1866, it will be replaced by another St. Ulfram Church, which is still a famous tourist attraction. 7 miles is about 11 kilometers. If it were in the future, most people would choose the subway or bus, and those with better conditions would drive or take a taxi. However, William's family in Xiaoniu were so poor at that time that they could not afford the price of a carriage. Therefore, after the group met at the entrance of the village, they could only take bus number 11 to go on the road. Mr. Fatty, pick it up. After meeting and setting off, William Esque threw something wrapped in broad leaves to Su Yun while walking, explaining, "This is your lunch and dinner. The party starts at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and ends at 3:30. It takes us about 7 hours to go there and back, so we can only eat dinner on the way. There's bread and water in the leaves. After eating, the leaves can be thrown away, but the water bag must be brought back." Su Yun nodded and touched the shape of the leaf bag with his hand. "Well, 4 pieces of bread and a hard water bag. William is indeed a kind person." Then the 8 of them set off. William carried Lilani on his back, Mrs. William led Elila and Andrea, and Xiaoniu continued to chat with Lisa. Su Yun looked around in a daze, always feeling that something was wrong. How come I am still a single dog in a different world? There is no such thing as extreme heat in England in winter, but due to the lack of nutrition, the physical fitness of several people in the William family is not very good. Therefore, after walking for more than an hour, William and others had a lot of sweat on their foreheads. When the group walked to a big tree, Mrs. William exhaled a little tiredly and pointed to the shade of the tree and said, "Dear, let's go there to rest." William looked at the sky and estimated the time slightly. It's still a few hours before the worship starts. "Okay, let's rest for a while." Then everyone stopped. Gurgle gurgle. William leaned against the tree and took a big sip of water. Just as he was about to speak, a carriage suddenly appeared slowly on the fork in the road not far away. It was a 4-wheeled carriage pulled by 2 sleek bay horses. The carriage was wrapped in luxurious high-quality cloth on all sides, and the windows were covered by a curtain of light blue crepe. There were many fine patterns carved on the corners. It was obvious that the people in the carriage were either rich or noble. Elula, who is the most timid, couldn't help but shrink her neck and lean behind William in fear. The 2 bay horses walked slowly from the road, snorting past a group of people. However, after a few steps, with a whistle, the carriage suddenly stopped. Chapter 27 Fateful Encounter. Creaking, the sound of the carriage's joints stopping quickly attracted the attention of everyone under the shade of the tree, and William's expression gradually became solemn. A moment later, whoosh, with the sound of a door curtain being lifted by the wind, a figure slowly walked down from the carriage. The man was a man in his early 30s, a little short and hunched, wearing a powdered wig made of horsehair and a gray robe. It is worth noting that the fabric of the robe was extremely rare silk. Although Gaul in the 17th century had a complete silk production system, and Lyon even became the center of silk production and design in Europe, silk was still a luxury item at the ceiling level before the Jenny spinning machine appeared. If tea at this time was at the level of Rolls-Royce Phantom, silk was almost at the level of Bentley Continental. Judging from the current map of England, the people who came were at least a rich second generation at the municipal level, or a capable wealthy businessman. William frowned slightly as he looked at the man walking towards them. He carefully protected Elora and Lilani behind him, while Mrs. Williams subconsciously stood in front of Andrea. As for Lisa, she was left aside. In this era, if the situation was the same, the safety of adult women was actually higher than that of children. The specific topic was too sensitive, so I won't go into details. However, next to Lisa, Xiaoniu had quietly picked up his holy book, intending to convince her with reason if something went wrong. Gulu, William looked at the man who was getting closer and closer. His Adam's apple rolled a few times, and before the other party told him the purpose of his visit, his tone was still respectful. "Sir, may I ask what do you want?" The man raised his eyelids and looked at him. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and he stretched out his hand to press down, indicating that he should not be nervous. "Please relax, sir. I am probably not the kind of person you think." Then he walked to Zioniu's side, stared at the Cambridge University uniform on his body for a few seconds, and focused on the school emblem of Trinity College for a few seconds. Cambridge University. Trinity College. I don't know if it's because of his high position. The tone of the man's tone was a little questioning, which made Zioniu inexplicably unhappy. But at this time, Zioniu was just the youth version of the future irritable brother. The lack of status and identity made him not confident enough, so he just replied dryly, "That's right." Then Isaac Barrow's student, "That's right." Hearing this, the man suddenly snorted coldly. "What's your name?" Zioniu's eyes flashed with a hint of gloom, and after a few seconds he said, "Isaac Newton." The visitor narrowed his eyes slightly, as if he noticed Zioniu's displeasure. "Isaac Newton. What a good name. Let me introduce myself, Robert Hooke, the current professor of geometry at Gresham College." Hearing this, Zioniu and William's family had no time to react, and Suyun's heart shrank heavily, and he almost twisted the bread in the leaf bag. It turned out to be him. Anyone who knows a little about Zioniu's experience should know. In Zioniu's 85-year-old life, there was a person who was both his teacher and his enemy, and they were inseparable. When mentioning Newton, this person must be mentioned. He is Robert Hooke. Hooke was born in July 1635. 7.5 years older than Zioniu. He had excellent grades since he was a child, and when he grew up, he was admitted to the famous Oxford University. However, due to some reasons, Hooke did not graduate with a degree in the end, but fortunately became Boyle's scientific research assistant. Due to his outstanding scientific insights, in 1662, this extraordinary young scientist was recommended as the Director General of the Royal Society Laboratory of the United Kingdom, and soon became a member of the Royal Society. As for Hooke's ability, he was able to love and hate with a maverick for decades. In mechanics, Hooke proposed Hooke's law, which is the basic law of elasticity and material mechanics, and the law is widely used. In the American TV series Prison Break, Milton used an egg beater to break through the reinforced concrete wall of the prison, based on Hooke's law. In optics, he pioneered the wave theory and was as famous as Huygens, the head of the Gallic Academy of Sciences. At the same time, Hooke was also a DIY expert. With his magical hands, he expanded the human vision in the world of the extremely large and the extremely small. He improved the telescope, observed the Great Red Spot of Jupiter and the craters on the Moon for the first time, improved the microscope, discovered and named cells. The other lay when Hooke discovered bacteria, and his masterpiece microscopy was in great demand. However, it is very dramatic that just when Hooke was in the limelight, the maverick came. In 1668, the young Newton placed the first reflecting telescope on the desk of the Royal Academy, which directly angered Hooke. The reflecting telescope was the most advanced telescope design at the time, and it directly invaded Hooke's two major areas of expertise in the society, optics and instrument design. When this small and exquisite model with performance exceeding that of previous refracting telescopes appeared, Hooke felt that his position was challenged, so he did not join the camp praising the reflecting telescope, but loudly declared that he was the first to make a practical reflecting telescope. At the meeting, Hooke emphasized that he had made a reflecting telescope of only 3 centimeters 7 years before Newton, and its performance was better than other telescopes up to 15 meters. He even had a smaller design that could be put in a pocket watch, but the spread of the Black Death and the reconstruction work of the Great Fire of London delayed further research. This debate caused great harm to Newton. Because he evoked the experience of being bullied in his youth, he even threatened to withdraw from the Royal Society. Finally, under the mediation of Henry Oldenburg, Secretary of the Royal Society, the two sides finally reached a settlement. But since then, Maverick began to seclude himself in Cambridge and no longer published his academic achievements. But the feud between Maverick and Hooke did not end. In 1679, Hooke wrote a letter to Newton. After a series of discussions on mechanics, Hooke told Newton that he believed that there was gravity between any two objects, and this gravity was inversely proportional to the square of the distance between the objects, which is the so-called inverse square law. To put it simply, Hooke pointed out Maverick's mistakes generously and did not hide them and watch him take a detour. But he also said arrogantly that this kind of calculation requires a new tool, Sonuzi. You know where you were wrong but you can't figure it out. Lel, this tool is actually calculus, which is what Maverick called flexion, which was close to perfection at the time. But Maverick was so cunning that he didn't tell Hooke about it, and secretly fiddled with it to derive the formula of universal gravitation. In 1687, With the support of British astronomer Halley, Niu published one of the greatest works in the history of human science, Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy, which was later referred to as Principles. In this book, Niu proposed the famous three laws of Newton's mechanics and the law of universal gravitation, and used the calculus he invented to prove that Kepler's three laws can be derived from the inverse square law of gravity. The publication of this book made Niu famous all over the world. Not only did he solve the world's problems at that time, but he also invented calculus, one of the most powerful tools in the history of mathematics. In Halley's words, he became the closest person to God on the world, and his life was perfect except for being single. At this time, Hooke wrote another letter to Niu, asking Niu to revise principles and admit that he was the discoverer of the inverse square law. This request completely angered Niu, and he wrote back to Hooke, saying that this law was not proposed by Hooke at all, but a well-known fact. At the same time, Niu was angry and directly deleted all the texts involving Hooke and principles, wanting Hooke to not exist in this ancient history. In addition, when talking about Maverick and Hooke, we have to mention another little-known story. We mentioned earlier the story of Taogong not bending for a few grains of rice. This letter involves another sentence that ruined childhood. Many people know that Maverick said, "If I can see farther, it is because I stand on the shoulders of giants." Many people think that this sentence is Maverick's motivational self-deprecation, but in fact it is a satire on Hooke. You know, Hooke himself is not tall and has a hunchback problem. Therefore, Maverick's reply letter is not intended to say inspirational words at all. The subtext is, "My achievements have nothing to do with you, Hooke, a hunchback dwarf, of course." The context of this sentence is a reply letter from Maverick when talking about the color of thin plates. At that time, Henry Oldenburg also stirred up a fire, yes, the old man mentioned above who was mediating when the two sides first met. Therefore, the details of this sentence are not so dramatic, at least it has nothing to do with gravity, but it is indeed a satirical sentence. Then after Hooke's death, Niu was elected as the new president of the Royal Society. In his first year, Hooke's laboratory and library were disbanded on the spot, and the experimental equipment left by Hooke was either dispersed or destroyed. Even when the Royal Society moved its headquarters in 1710, the only portrait of Hooke was accidentally lost during the move, and no one knows what Hooke really looked like. So let's not say that in a sense, the argument between Niu and Hooke was a life and death struggle between academic cliques from beginning to end. But what surprised Suyun was that, let alone why Hooke appeared here, the argument between Niu and Hooke should have happened 13 years later, so why did the two of them seem to be arguing with each other when they met now? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 28, Grudges. Under the Shade of the Tree. Looking at the somewhat explosive Niu and Hooke, Suyun quickly recalled the history he knew. I don't know if it was because of Niu's interference, but the specific resume of Hooke in later generations was not detailed, and it was basically glossed over. Most of the time, when Hooke was mentioned, it was just like mentioning Yulun just to set off Faker, just to praise or belittle Niu. Therefore, for a while, Suyun really couldn't think of when Niu and Hooke met, and could only find clues and inferences by himself. In 1665, Hooke was a professor at Gresham College. His hometown, the Isle of Wight, is also in the south of England, which is completely in two directions from Lincolnshire. And in the second half of the year, Microscopic Images was published. Suyun flipped through Hooke's more public resumes one by one, and compared them one by one in his mind. Thinking about it, his eyes suddenly lit up. Wait, publishing Microscopic Images? In the 17th century in Britain, the right to define science was firmly in the hands of the Royal Society, which was a standard academic monopoly. Anyone who wants to publish academic books must first obtain approval from the Society, and then print them through the Society's publishing house. At this moment, there is only one publishing house affiliated with the Royal Society of the United Kingdom, and it happens to be in Lincolnshire. Thinking of this, Suyun's goal gradually swept over the two of them, that is to say, Hooke should be preparing to go to Lincolnshire to discuss publishing matters, so there is no reason for him to fight with Niu at this time. Is it because of the grudge between Cambridge and Oxford University? Students who have studied as exchange students at Cambridge University should know. Cambridge and Oxford, as two of the most famous colleges in the UK, the grudges between them can even be traced back to before the establishment of the school. Oxford is the main city in the Thames Valley. Legend has it that it was a place where cattle waded through the water in ancient times, so it was named Oxford. As we all know, before the 12th century, there was actually no university in the UK. People went to France and other European countries to study. In 1167, some scholars returned from Paris and gathered in Oxford. With the support of the king and the church, the current Oxford University was formed. In 1209, a student from Oxford University accidentally killed a woman while practicing archery and then fled, exacerbating the conflict with the citizens of Oxford. Then 2 scholars and several classmates who lived with the student were hanged by the citizens of Oxford without consulting the church. The church often gave priority to pardoning scholars. Then the conflict intensified, triggering violent conflicts between the school and the citizens. During the conflict, some teachers and students fled north to the town of Cambridge, and with the support of the local church, they began to concentrate on cultural and academic research in the local area. Thus, the current University of Cambridge was formed. Therefore, the 2 schools had a lot of grievances from the beginning, and the school emblems of both sides were even opposite. There is a book on the school emblems of Cambridge University and Oxford University, but the Book of Cambridge is closed, and the Book of Oxford is open. During the English Civil War, Oxford was the headquarters of Charles I and the Royalists, while Cambridge was the base of the Parliamentary Army, and they also became politically opposed. Therefore, if Hooke saw the university uniform of the Mavericks on the road because of the hostility of the school, then this would be a very dramatic thing. While Su-Yun was thinking, Hooke beside him spoke again. "Boy, how is Barrow doing recently?" Hearing Hooke mention his teacher's name for the second time, Xiaoniu vaguely understood something. "The teacher is in good health, Mr. Hooke. Do you know him?" Hooke heard this and immediately raised a sneer at the corner of his mouth. With his hunched body, he looked a bit like Kasimov. "More than knowing him? I didn't get a bachelor's degree at the beginning. Forget it, there's no point in talking to students like you. How about this, you help me pass on something?" As he spoke, Hooke took out a piece of paper from his body, on which were several lines of densely written words. "I don't have Barrow's address. If you know where he is, send this question to him and let him take a good look. If he can't figure it out, according to our original bet, he will resign from his position as Professor Lucas. Of course, it doesn't matter if you can't find him or he pretends to be dead. I will visit him in person after the Black Death is over. In short, he can't escape. The best outcome for him is to get out of here in disgrace." Hearing Hooke's villainous words, Xiaoniu's face suddenly sank. "Professor Lucas. This is not a person's name, but an honorary position at Cambridge University. It is awarded to researchers related to mathematics and physics, and only one person is awarded at the same time. The owner of this chair is called Professor Lucas. In a sense, this is somewhat similar to the shadow in the legend of the Eyes of the 5 village fights. There may be 4 or 5 shadow-level combat forces in a village, but there is only one person who can truly be called a shadow to represent the highest honor. Xiaoniu's mentor Isaac Barrow is Professor Lucas in this area, that is, the shadow. Yes, Xiaoniu's math teacher is also called Isaac. After all, the West is not like the locals. They are typical of having fewer first names and more surnames, so it is quite normal to have the same name. Xiaoniu has a very close relationship with Barrow. According to the decryption of his manuscripts after his death, Barrow at this time has even obtained the product and quotient of 2 functions and the differential theorem. But in the end, he still passed this part of knowledge to his beloved disciple, making a huge contribution to the establishment of calculus. According to the course of history, Barrow would have resigned from the post of Professor Lucas in 1669 and recommended Xiaoniu to succeed him. If William was the undisputed top 1 in Xiaoniu's heart, Barrow, Stock, Lisa now, and Hawley in the future should be top 2. Therefore, when Xiaoniu suddenly heard Hooke's rude words, he was immediately furious. He simply checked the letter that Hooke gave him, and after quickly scanning a few lines, a trace of surprise and uncertainty flashed in his eyes. Then he suddenly raised his head and shouted to Hooke, who had turned to leave. "Mr. Hooke, please wait a moment." Hooke stopped when he heard the words, picked up his robe that was already touching the ground, turned around and looked at Xiaoniu. "Is there anything else?" Xiaoniu first glanced at Su-Yun on the side, took a deep breath, and said, Mr. Hook, you don't need to pass your question to the teacher, just give me 5 days and I can solve the answer. Note, the matter between Barrow and Hook is actually very strange. Not to mention that it is related to Newton, it also involves Hook's graduation and Barrow's resignation, but almost no one in the country has mentioned it. It's a bit puzzling, but the matter is definitely true. It's really confusing. Chapter 29 I Need Your Help. Mr. Hook, you don't need to pass your question to the teacher. Just give me 5 days and I can solve the answer. Zioniu's words were clearly heard by Hook, and he couldn't help but stop. The somewhat hunched middle-aged man slightly straightened his chest, turned around, and looked at Zioniu with an expression of "Are you sick, student Newton? Do you understand what this problem represents? This involves an inexplicable magnitude of equations near the equilibrium position. Not to mention it is a field that even your teacher has never touched." As he said this, he looked at the holy book in Zioniu's hand with a meaningful look, and sneered, "You, a little student, dare to say such a thing? If I were you, I would definitely not have the face to hold that holy book again." As he spoke, Hook suddenly felt a sense of pleasure that a great revenge was about to be avenged. That year's mathematics final was between Cambridge and Oxford, and the final score was 4-3. Barrow came on the stage in a desperate situation of falling behind 1-3 and completed a series of 3. At that time, Hook saw his crush, Ira Bryce, sitting on a chair and crying. At that moment, he thought, if I can challenge Barrow, I must win everything. Now the opportunity is right in front of him, and Hook must consider whether this will be his only chance in his life. He believes that Oxford can have the dominant position in the past, and Ira Bryce has made an indelible contribution. Rebuilding the glory of Oxford is our duty. The questions that Hook came up with this time covered both mathematics and physics. They were the results of his 3-year derivation. He firmly believed that Barrow would be helpless with it. It was a pity that due to the Black Death, he temporarily lost Barrow's contact information, and could only wait for London to restore order every day before going to Cambridge to get back. Unexpectedly, on the way to the printing factory, he actually met Zioniu, a student of Trinity College, which made him happy and annoyed. The good thing was that as a student of the seminary, Zioniu must have Barrow's contact information, and he didn't need to wait until the Black Death was over to find Barrow. The annoyance was that this young man seemed a little arrogant. How dare he get involved in such an academic debate? Has he always been so brave? Opposite Hooker, Zioniu's brows furrowed even more, and he was obviously extremely unhappy. However, the other party was targeting Barrow, and his remaining rationality still restrained the idea of taking action. At this time, the well-known troll showed his emotional intelligence very rarely. Mr. Hook, since you have been paying attention to Trinity College, you should know that Trinity College accepted a reduced-fee student 4 years ago. Hook looked at him with a slight surprise and nodded. Yes, I've heard about it. It was the first time in 15 years that the 4 major theological colleges of Cambridge University have recruited reduced-fee students. I heard that he also got first-class honors in mathematics. As he spoke, Hook suddenly reacted. Wait, could that be you, the reduced-fee student? Zioniu pointed to William's family on the side, and said calmly, you can ask my uncle and aunt. By the way, Grantham is in front, and the principal of King's School in the town also knows me. Hearing this, Hook's face finally showed a little surprise. As the top college in the British Isles, Cambridge University will also accept some reduced-fee students in addition to the normal students every year. However, in addition to the high assessment requirements, most of the reduced-fee students are affiliated with ordinary colleges in this era. Most universities are equipped with ordinary colleges plus a few seminaries. For example, in addition to 31 ordinary colleges, Cambridge University also has 4 seminaries managed by the church, which are not administratively affiliated with Cambridge University. Don't think that the seminaries are praying and holding mass every day just because they have theology. In fact, the seminaries are equivalent to local YO classes or youth classes in this era. For example, Trinity College, Wittgenstein, Bertrand Russell and even Nehru graduated from this college. However, the seminary emphasizes that you must devote yourself to serving. You are serving when you learn knowledge, and you are serving when you sleep and pray, but working turn tuition is to seek benefits for yourself. Therefore, reduced-fee students are extremely excluded in the seminary, and the assessment requirements are simply inhumane. Before Zioniu became a reduced-fee student at Trinity College, Cambridge had not recruited reduced-fee students for 15 years. By the way, In 1680, due to the struggle between Protestants and Catholics, Trinity College abolished the reduced fee student system for 100 years. Therefore, Zioniu is the last reduced fee student at Trinity School in the 17th century. Because of Zioniu's lofty historical status, Trinity College was even ready to abolish the reduced fee student quota 100 years later. It was not until the emergence of another genius that Trinity College broke the rules again. This person was James Clerk Maxwell. That's right, the man who proposed the greatest formula in human history. So sometimes you can't help but sigh that some things are really amazing. In short, the reduced fee students at Trinity College, in online novels, are almost like the Supreme Hall accepting an apprentice, with a guaranteed supreme starting point. Maybe at some point you will get a desolate heavenly emperor, which is awesome. As a member of the Royal Society and an enemy who is paying attention to Barrow's movements, Hook would naturally not ignore this news. After learning that Zioniu is the legendary Wang Xiandi, the reduced fee student, Hook's expression immediately became more serious. The reduced fee student 4 years ago should have graduated this year, and his ability was obviously not the same as that of the current students. At the same time, it was precisely because of this certainty that Hook suddenly had a bad taste of killing both the master and the apprentice. He suddenly changed his mind and said, "Student Newton, as you can see, this is an academic discussion between me and your master, but as a university professor, I am also happy to see a junior with the determination to challenge his predecessors. 5 days, right? No problem, I will stay in Lincolnshire for a week. As long as you solve the answer, you can come to me at any time. The address is the Adja Hotel in the southwest of Lincoln, about 40 kilometers away from Grantham," he said. He straightened his chest and patted Zioniu's shoulder meaningfully. "I hope to see you again before I leave Lincolnshire. Good luck, Isaac Newton." After that, he straightened his collar and left the scene without looking back. Da-da-da. Soon, the two horses took sporadic steps, pulling the carriage away slowly. When the carriage gradually disappeared from sight, William, who had been silent throughout the whole process, stepped forward and frowned. "Little Isaac, how did you get involved in this matter?" As a graduate of Cambridge University, William naturally understood what Professor Lucas represented. It was obvious that this was a sharp academic confrontation. Although academic confrontations do not involve swords and swords, sometimes the outcome is almost the same as death, or even worse. It is obviously not a wise move for an ordinary bachelor like Zioniu to participate in it. But Zioniu simply shook his head at him without explaining too much, and then turned to look at Suyun. "Fat fish, I need your help." Suyun, who was standing aside, was stunned when he heard this, and blinked his eyes in confusion. Originally, he thought he could just sit back and watch the show because Zioniu's tone was so firm, but now why is it involving him again? Then Zioniu handed Hook's paper to him and said, "Take a look at this." Suyun took the paper, opened it and looked at it for a few times. His pupils shrank slightly. F equals K, X. This is a formula that all high school students know, which is the famous Hooke's law. This law is the mechanical elasticity theory proposed by Hooke in 1678. Now it is 1665. Although Hooke has not yet completely derived this definition, he has obviously started some research work. And on this piece of paper, it is recorded about the calculation of the space occupied by the continuous medium that has not undergone deformation. This problem is very complicated to explain, but in human language, with a simple semantic explanation, it involves the second-order Taylor expansion. Of course, for Zioniu, it is the second-order Hanli expansion. That is, calculus. However, at this time, Zioniu has not yet completely derived the overall framework of calculus. Strictly speaking, the definition of strain tensor has to wait until William Rowan Hamilton introduced it in 1846. Yes, the Hamilton who invented quaternions. Therefore, in order to solve Hooke's problem, Zioniu could only seek help outside the field. Suyun looked at the problem on the paper and quickly thought of 17 or 18 solutions. However, considering the current situation, he still had a look of difficulty on his face. It seems that this problem can be solved, but it will take some time to calculate. However, Mr. Newton, we are still on the road now, why not wait until we get back? Zioniu looked at William's family, looked up at the sky, and nodded. Stand still. Chapter 30 Grantham. As an absolutely devout believer, Zioniu never changed his faith until his death. If loyalty has a numerical value, then it must be 100%. Therefore, Even though he was concerned at this time, Xiaoyu did not choose to say goodbye halfway and go home to calculate the problems left by Hook, but planned to continue to Grantham to attend the party. So, when Hook's carriage gradually went away, the group packed up their bags and set off again. 3 hours later, after resting twice on the way, the 8 people finally arrived at the entrance of a town. This is a small town surrounded by a wall. The wall is about 4 meters high, and there is a stone tablet at the entrance. There is an English inscription on the stone tablet, which translates to Grantham. Soo-yoon came to this town once during the 2 years when he went to the UK as an exchange student, and stayed there for 3.5 days. After all, this is Xiaoyu's hometown. In a sense, it can be regarded as a holy land in the physics world. Most physics practitioners who have the opportunity to come to London will come here to check in. At that time, Soo-yoon, who was short of money, stayed at a hotel called Ramada, which was located right near the entrance of Grantham City Wall. As soon as he entered the town, he could see the gate on the right-hand side. The hotel was listed as a 4-star hotel, but the room price only cost more than 290 Chinese yuan after tax, which was very cheap. However, the soundproofing of the hotel was a bit bad, and some applause could be heard in the middle of the night. At that time, the hotel owner patted his chest and told Soo-yoon that their hotel had a history of more than 400 years, but it had been renovated several times in the middle, so it didn't look very old. At that time, there was a 400-year-old sign certified by the John Bull government on the wall, so Soo-yoon foolishly believed it and took out €3 to take a photo with the sign. But now that he came to Grantham, he really wanted to spit on the boss's bald head, which was about the same amount of hair as the programmer. That hotel has a history of 400 years. The place where the hotel is located in this era is obviously a fruit stand now. As expected, you can't believe anything when you travel these days. Some people even question local history. What a shame they have faked it. Note 1. In addition to the hotel being replaced by a fruit stall, the architectural conditions of the entire town of Grantham are also very different from those of later generations. Although Grantham in later generations still maintains classical decoration, both the buildings and streets are very clean. Some are similar to the former residences of local celebrities, and the main feature is the atmosphere of the times. But at this moment, the visible parts of the town are almost all 2-story and 3-story brick houses, without any architectural style. The exterior is damaged and black, and the shady side is covered with moss. Soo-yoon glanced casually and could see a few pieces of filth that could be mosaicked in the corners of the roadside walls. Although the main road of the town is relatively clean, it is paved with stones to form a 7 or 8 meter wide street, and there are constantly pedestrians and vehicles traveling on it. But if you look closely, you will find that some of the gaps or edges of the stones are stained with an inexplicable, faintly yellow mucus. It is not difficult to see from the flies that occasionally fly over it that the composition of these mucus is probably not good stuff. But what surprised Soo-yoon at first sight was that there were many skinny poor people in ragged clothes in the town who seemed to be unaware of it, just sitting or even lying in the filth. Their eyes were numb, and they let flies, rats, and cockroaches run around and even on their bodies. Seeing this, Soo-yoon sighed slightly. Whether it is the early colonial period or the future industrial revolution era, the lower class people in the British Peninsula are not doing well. Some people may get lucky, but more have become the denominator of certain fractions, with tears and hatred, turning into a black cloud over London, and have not been able to rest until now. Then, under the guidance of William and his wife, the group began to walk straight to the southwest. Grantham is not large in area. It took only more than 10 minutes before and after, and everyone came to the tallest building in Grantham except the bell tower, which is in front of St. Titus Church. The height of St. Titus Church is about 12 or 13 meters. It is a square body with 3 columns in a group. The width of the bay varies greatly. The facade has a strong sense of convexity and concavity. There is a red cross on the top. It is noble, majestic, and oppressive. Obviously, this is a standard Baroque-style building. The early churches in Europe were Romanesque, and later developed into Gothic. At this point in time, Baroque-style decoration has become popular. However, by the 18th century, the architectural style will be reincarnated again. By then, the Gothic style will sit up in shock from the dying illness, talking and laughing for hundreds of years, and even affecting the local architectural design field. At the door of the church stood a kind-looking priest, who was about 60 years old, with simple but high-quality clothes and shiny hair. The priest would hug everyone enthusiastically when he saw them, and he did not dislike the other person's body odor or dirt at all. Perhaps because there was only one gathering place in the town, a long line had formed in front of the church, and people kept coming from all directions to fill the gaps at the end of the line. Soo-yoon and his group waited in line for about 10 minutes and finally arrived in front of the pastor. William's family was obviously old believers of this church. The moment he saw them, the pastor said William's name without hesitation, "Hallelujah. Mr. Askew. It is such a pleasure to meet you. May you be anointed by God and may your family be blessed, hallelujah. Pastor Yarlin." Thank God for his guidance. William generously hugged the other party warmly, followed by Mrs. William, Lisa, Leilani and others. When Zioniu came forward, Pastor Yarlin suddenly became more enthusiastic. After all, this was the only student with reduced fees who could be admitted by Trinity Theological Seminary as an exception in more than 10 years, little Isaac. Praise God, your arrival will please my Lord. May God protect your heart more than anything else, because the fruit of a lifetime comes from the heart. In the face of Pastor Yarlin's praise, Zioniu showed humility and respect very rarely. You basically don't want to see this kind of expression in life, hallelujah. Mr. Yarlin. Yarlin patted his shoulder heavily, and then cast his eyes on Soo-yoon. Oh, my lord. Who is this? Zioniu glanced at Soo-yoon and introduced him. Mr. Yarlin, this is my friend from the east. His name is Donkey Fiu, and he comes with us today to worship and serve. Hearing this, Soo-yoon stepped forward and nodded to Yarlin. Hello, Mr. Yarlin. Yarlin looked at him carefully and said, Welcome, child, may God bless you. Note, I was chatting with others in the group about revising the work, and suddenly remembered that the original name of this book was going to be The Technological Empire Starts with the Elimination of Cockroaches, but it was rejected by many people. Let me ask you here, do you really think it sounds bad? If it sounds bad, leave 1 here. If it's okay, leave 2 here. I'll see if my naming is really that bad. Chapter 31 The Buds of Infinity. Due to the European Reformation, Protestantism and Catholicism had been in opposition a long time ago. Protestantism is different from Catholicism. As the core sect in Britain today, Protestantism is extremely tolerant of all classes. This can be understood as a big opening promotion, so the benefits are quite favorable. However, from a historical perspective, Protestantism abolished the Catholic indulgence, which is still worthy of recognition. Therefore, guided by relatively open-minded ideas, Yarlin did not delve too deeply into deep issues such as whether Soo-yoon was a believer or baptized, and soon let William and his party in. The space inside St. Titus Church is very large. The upper and lower floors can accommodate about 800 to 1,000 people sitting and standing. At the front is a high platform for preaching and a place for the choir to stand. After entering the church, William and his family found a position on the left side relatively in the middle as their seats for this worship. Then after some adjustments, it was finally decided that 7 people would sit and Leilani would sit on Mrs. Williams' lap. Then about half an hour later, a choir walked up to the podium at the front, and everyone in the church stood up at the same time and sang hymns. Since Soo-yoon's knowledge of hymns was limited to the Hallelujah, which had a very similar rhythm to Love My China, he could only hum like a wooden man during this process, which seemed to be a bit of a sham. After the hymn was finished, Pastor Yarlin, whom he had met before, walked onto the podium. After a simple prayer, he began to preach. Yarlin was preaching the Gospel of Matthew today, and there happened to be a passage in it that Soo-yoon was quite familiar with. If a man gains the whole world and loses his own soul, what profit will it be? What can a man give in exchange for his soul? Soo-yoon was not a believer, but this sentence inexplicably touched him for a long time, and he remembered it unconsciously. Some of them were famous sayings like there is no Bodhi tree, and a mirror is not a stand, and even those who were not members of the church had heard them several times. The whole sermon lasted for an hour and a half. Soo-yoon listened to the whole process half absent-mindedly and half seriously. The second half was basically observing other people in the church. After the sermon, Yarlin wiped the sweat from his forehead with some effort and said, Hallelujah. All God's people, may our Lord bless each of your families, may your footbells become beautiful, may we be glorified together one day. Please stand up and receive the Holy Communion. Hearing this, everyone present stood up at once. After a while, the solemn and heavy piano sounded, and the choir continued to sing hymns. Pastor Yarlin personally carried a small plate, followed by 3 or 4 people, and walked from the front row to the back. Suyun and his group were in the middle of many seats, so it didn't take long for Yerlin to come to them. The rules of the Holy Communion are actually very simple. There is a small wooden plate on the plate in Yerlin's hand, on which is a piece of sesame cake the size of a fingernail, and next to it is a wine pot. Everyone can use their own cup to fill a little wine. According to the requirements, everyone just needs to drink the sesame cake and wine. Suyun had heard about this process on his way here, so when it was his turn, he didn't resist too much and generously took up the sesame cake and wine and swallowed it. After all, this was not a church initiation ceremony, but just a kind of church etiquette of Thanksgiving. Suyun would definitely not take the initiative to touch it, but if it really came to this point, he would not resist too much. Under normal circumstances, the wine of the Holy Communion is mostly wine, which indicates the blood of the Son of God. However, due to the current interruption of cargo voyages, there is not much wine left in Grantham, so Yerlin used newly brewed apple wine to replace the former this time. The color of apple wine is actually more like blood than wine, but the taste of fresh apple wine is far inferior to that of wine, especially when it is made of apples like Bramley, which are very acidic. Therefore, as soon as Suyun took a sip, his taste buds felt a strong sour taste. However, as the wine entered his stomach, Suyun's hand holding the wooden wine glass suddenly froze, and a flash of lightning flashed through his mind. He thought of something to make his first money. Yes, it's this. After the Holy Communion, William and his party carefully packed up their packages, mainly holy books and leaf bags, and then left the church. Unlike the way they came, Suyun and his party did not encounter any accidents on the way back, and they only chatted with a few villagers who were traveling with them. After walking and resting for more than 3 hours, the 8 people finally returned to the small village of Woolsthorpe. Then Xiaoniu and Suyun, 2 young men, said goodbye to William's family at the intersection of the village and returned home. As soon as he returned to the garden room, Xiaoniu took out the paper that Hook left for him and said, "Feiyu, don't talk first, listen to my solution." Suyun readily agreed. After all, with Xiaoniu's ambition, Suyun was just an auxiliary tool man, and the solution must be solved by himself. "You tell me, Mr. Newton." When Hook left, he had Red Hook's problem. It is actually very simple to describe it in words. Suppose you have a marble and let it roll in a regular pit. You know the relationship between the depth of the pit and the horizontal coordinate v, r, then find the properties of this function, that is, the problem of calculating the space occupied by the undeformed continuous medium. My idea is this. Xiaoniu quickly drew a diagram on the paper and said, if we frame it in the Cartesian coordinate system, assuming that the marble is a point mass, and the interaction is only at a short distance x, then the force component applied to each small piece inside the medium can be regarded as applied to the surface of this medium, so there should be a certain amount of force density corresponding to a certain amount on the surface. Suyun continued to nod. The certain amount that Xiaoniu mentioned was actually the volume integral and a table integral. Being able to start with integrals means that Xiaoniu's calculus framework is not far from being completed, which is undoubtedly good news. Then we assume that x is the displacement of the small surface element. According to parallelogram product property mentioned in Cardano's large numbers published in 1545, A should be derived, and then the symmetry of the quantity can be used for further calculations. At this point, Xiaoniu suddenly stopped talking. Obviously, his thoughts ended here. Note? Well, I am a waste of names. Chapter 32 The Buds of Infinity. In the room, looking at the frustrated Xiaoniu, Suyun's heart was filled with emotion. Although this person's character is really bad, his brain is really great. Look at what he mentioned, not to mention calculus. He also mentioned the concept of normal vector, the concept of potential energy, the concept of net torque and the assumption of small deformation. All of the above concepts were officially publicized theories after 1807. Who can do this kind of thinking span of 150 to 200 years? Indeed. The problem raised by Hook is actually very simple, so simple that Suyun thought of nearly 20 solutions at the first time. The quickest way is to solve it by setting up a covariant derivative in a non-Cartesian coordinate system. But don't forget that Suyun's knowledge was learned from later generations, and the basic theory at that time had been summarized quite well. Just like the era of mastering controlled nuclear fusion, you can make a 200cc engine with your eyes closed. But what about Xiaoniu? He belonged to the era of drilling wood to make fire, but he saw that the calculation formula for the cetane number of the internal combustion engine was so outrageous. Thinking of this, Su-Yoon felt like laughing for some reason. He once wrote a novel, but not Newton. Even Maxwell was dissed by some comments as I checked it out. It's just a system of equations. Then he took a deep breath and turned his mind back to the scene. Mr. Newton, I agree with your idea very much, but there are too many unknown mathematical tools that need to be used, and the current research progress in the mathematics community seems a bit weak. Zionia nodded and generously admitted this. That's right, but in addition to this, we must use the Harnley expansion you mentioned. After that, Zionia continued to lower his head and quickly listed another line of formulas. VR equals VRE plus V, Re, plus V, Re, 2, Re, cap 2 plus V, Re, 3, Re, cap 3. Then Zionia underlined this line of formulas, frowned and said, if Harnley expansion is used, what should be the properties of the pinball near the stable position? This should be a series, but the division is another problem. Su-Yoon looked up at him and said, Mr. Newton, what if the stable position is calculated as a minimum? Let's assume that there is a mathematical approach, that is, infinitely approaching zero. For some reason, Zionia suddenly felt a strange emotion in his heart, as if he saw Lisa coming out of the bedroom arm in arm with someone else. But he quickly put this emotion behind him, thought for a while and said, isn't that the reason for the method of cutting the circle? The method of cutting the circle is an early way of thinking about calculating pi. People who have been to elementary school should all know this method. It actually implies such an idea, although there is a gap between two quantities, as long as the gap can be infinitely reduced, it can be considered that the two quantities will eventually be equal. The method of cutting the circle is already an abandoned mathematical tool in this era. With Su-Yoon being able to casually talk about Harnley's mathematical attainments, theoretically he should not make this mistake of regressing in thinking. Facing Zionia's question, Su-Yoon shook his head gently and said, Mr. Newton, the concept you are talking about is a non-series variable, but what if we take it a step further and understand it as a series variable? Or even a step further, what if we regard it as a constant that transcends the real number framework, approaching zero, series variable? Constant. Zionia was stunned when he heard Su-Yoon's words. The concept of infinitesimal is a question that has been a problem for countless college students. Generally speaking, from college students to doctors, a person's understanding of infinitesimal goes through 3 stages. In the first and second stages, infinitesimal are all variables. When you reach the third stage, all infinitesimal become constants, and each infinitesimal corresponds to a constant. These constants are not on the framework of real numbers, but are generated by the axioms of non-standard analysis models. The first stage is the cognition when studying mathematical analysis or advanced mathematics in college, that is, how small infinitesimal can be. That is, the absolute value of positive and negative infinitesimal is less than any given positive real number. The second stage is when we learn non-standard analysis. Many calculus formulas introduce infinitesimal, and concepts such as order appear. The third stage is when we understand the theory of mathematical models, when infinitesimal can become constants. Once we realize that infinitesimal are constants, we will find that there is a broader mathematical world, which is broader, deeper and more complex than the mathematical world known today. The second type of limit ideas and their geometric structures appear. The second type of limit ideas are given by infinite space, and the limit ideas of standard analysis are given by infinitesimal space. Then there is the compatibility phenomenon of Euclidean geometry and non-Euclidean geometry, and the coordinates of parallel intersections can be accurately expressed. The above situation has derived a lot of unconventional geometries, which are neither Euclidean geometry nor non-Euclidean geometry, but belong to the third type of geometry, Chinese geometry, etc. What is the practical significance of the third stage of understanding infinitesimal? To put it bluntly, you can go and build supercomputers. At present, the most in-depth research on the third stage in China is the University of Science and Technology of China. The quantum computer of academician Pan Jianwei and Professor Lu Chaoyuan is also one of the intuitive manifestations of this convenience. Friends who have participated in interviews for supercomputer algorithm development should know that the third-order cognition of infinitesimal is a must-test question in interviews. Although Zionia's theoretical knowledge was not so perfect at this time, as the proposer and founder of calculus, especially the concept of infinitesimal, he could vaguely respond to this information. Then Su-Yoon took the pen and continued to write, Assuming that the coefficient of the first-order term is 0 at the equilibrium position, then the minimum can only be retained to the quadratic approximation, and naturally the potential energy is quadratically related to the equilibrium deviation, V, R, V, Re, 2, R Re, cap 2 V, R, K/2, R Re, cap 2. Right here. Soo-yoon stopped writing, glanced at Xiao-Nia, who was a little absent-minded, and turned away quietly. Before leaving, he took a small bag of white sugar, a little salt, a small half-spoonful of butter, an unused crucible and 2 potatoes from the table. The former are commonly used seasonings for breakfast and dinner, and the latter 2 are emergency reserve food. Then he tiptoed and gently closed the door. Xiao-Nia made no comment. He just stared at Soo-yoon's formula, especially the equal sign. After a few minutes, his Adam's apple suddenly slid up and down a few times, and a few gurgling sounds came out of his mouth. After a moment, he rushed back to his seat and quickly started writing. 3 hours later, Xiao-Nia rushed out of the door with a bang. Well, in the physical sense, he rushed out of the door. He knocked the door down and held it in his hand. There was no way. The house was too old. It was just after 8 o'clock in the evening, so Xiao-Nia saw a cluster of fire not far away, and Soo-yoon's face reflected in the fire. The calf walked quickly to his side and said excitedly, "Fat fish, I figured it out. It's a force that changes linearly with distance, an elastic force. There are no requirements for its specific form. In other words, any system near steady state will exhibit elastic behavior. This is a formula that has not been discovered by anyone, a theorem under steady state. I bet that Hooke himself didn't deduce it, because the function he gave actually has a 0th order term." The calf ran while mumbling to Soo-yoon. When he came to the side of the fire, he found that Soo-yoon was lowering his head and tinkering with something. "Fat fish, what are you doing, Mr. Newton? You're just in time." Looking at the calf in front of him, Soo-yoon picked up a plate and smiled brightly. "The freshly baked potatoes are delicious with sauce." "Sauce? What sauce?" "Ketchup." Chapter 33, The Big Killer for Making Money. Ketchup. Beside the campfire, Xiao-Nia looked at the potatoes and ketchup in front of him hesitantly and asked Soo-yoon, "Is it the sauce made from tomatoes?" "Yes, but aren't tomatoes poisonous?" Hearing Xiao-Nia's words, Soo-yoon couldn't help laughing. "Mr. Newton, everyone says that tomatoes are poisonous, and people in history have indeed died from eating tomatoes. But think about it, who are those people, or what class are they from?" "People? Class?" Hearing Soo-yoon's words, Xiao-Nia was stunned at first, then he thought of something, and ran back to the house after saying a word. "Wait a minute, I'll go back and get a book." After a moment, Xiao-Nia returned to the scene with a book about 3 centimeters thick, flipping through it as he walked. William Porter, an agricultural tycoon in Leeds. Milton Bridges, a royal nobleman in Spain. Thistly Wyatt, a daughter of an Italian nobleman. Xiao-Nia was holding the Herbiary Plants written by John Gerard, who was also the culprit for the tomato being banished to the Cold Palace in modern Europe. He clearly mentioned in the book that tomatoes are poisonous and cannot be eaten, so no one in Britain dared to eat tomatoes throughout the 17th century. It was not until the mid-18th century that the British gradually dared to use tomatoes in daily dishes, and they had to be steamed for a long time to eliminate the toxins. This book records a large number of examples of poisoning due to eating tomatoes, which became a strong basis for John Gerard's argument. Snap! After flipping through more than a dozen examples, Xiao-Nia closed the book and said thoughtfully, "Class." After a few seconds, his eyes suddenly lit up. "Yes, it is a bit strange. These people seem to be businessmen or dignitaries who are not short of money. How come there is not a single commoner?" Soo-yoon raised a smile at the corner of his mouth and continued to guide. "Mr. Newton, think about what tableware they use." "Tableware?" Xiao-Nia's eyes drifted slightly to the sky, looking at the moonlight, and recalled, "Usually it's solder. I've seen it several times at school banquets. When Uncle William was still rich in his early years, he also participated in some upper-middle-class gatherings." "Then think about it again. Is there anything in the solder that might react with tomatoes?" Xiao-Nia had already vaguely sensed something at this time, and even before Soo-yoon gave a hint, he began to think in the direction of dissolution and reaction. Solder is generally a mixture, basically silver, tin, lead, etc. Lead. He grabbed the book tightly with one hand, suddenly raised his head, and stared at Soo-yoon. "You mean the acid in tomatoes dissolves the lead in solder, causing people to be poisoned and die?" Soo-yoon shrugged and said nothing. Everything was said without words. The tomato plant was one of the specialties brought back from America by the Spanish in the early 16th century. It flowed into Britain at the end of the 16th century, but for a long time, people only regarded tomatoes as ornamental plants and did not dare to eat them. The first reason is that tomatoes belong to the Solanaceae family, and most Solanaceae plants contain toxic alkaloids, such as belladonna, datura, and other Solanaceae plants are poisonous. So at that time, people believed that tomatoes were also poisonous and should try to stay away from them. But in fact, the toxins of tomatoes are mainly found in rhizomes and in mature fruits. The alkaloid content of mature tomatoes is very low and will not cause much harm to health at all. The second reason is the quack John Gerard mentioned above. In his 1597 book Herbalism, he directly classified tomatoes as poisonous, but in fact, this part of his content was plagiarized from an article by Doddens, and he also copied the name of tomato Lycopersicum as Lycoperticum. However, there was no public channel to refute rumors in Europe at that time, and the examples mentioned by John Gerard had all happened in reality, which made tomatoes excluded from the diet for a long time and could be seen everywhere in the wild. For example, not long ago, Su Yun casually looked outside and found a lot of wild ripe tomatoes, which no one wanted to eat at all. And this misunderstanding of tomatoes made Su Yun think of ketchup, a super killer. Don't look at ketchup, which looks unremarkable and seems to be far from soap and antibiotics. But in modern Europe, the status of ketchup is almost the same as that of Laugan Ma in China, and even better. French fries, hamburgers, afternoon tea, bread, steaks. Almost everything can be ketchup. Speaking of ketchup, there is also a little-known story. Everyone should know that the English name of ketchup is ketchup, but this name does not come from English itself, but is transliterated from another language. This language is not another language, but Chinese. The earliest record of the word ketchup in the Oxford Dictionary in English was in 1690, ketchup, Wikipedia, but the raw material was not tomatoes. The source of the word is the Chinese ketchup, which originally refers to the marinade produced by pickling fish and is used for seasoning when cooking. Stanford University professor Ren Xiaodong once wrote a blog titled The Language of Food. He believes that the roots of ketchup can be traced back to a kind of fish sauce in the eastern Fujian province. In the 18th century in the Minnan dialect, this fish sauce was called ketchup, jichup or qiuchiap in different regions. People who know Minnan or Cantonese can recognize the last syllable of the American pronunciation of the word, chiap or chup, which means sauce, and the Mandarin pronunciation is juice. He also wrote that the 1982 edition of the Mandarin Minnan Dialect Dictionary confirmed that fan is an archaic character, pronounced yu in Minnan dialect, meaning stored fish. Therefore, tomato sauce is an archaic word for fish sauce in Minnan dialect. 2 papers, doi. 10.1515BZ 1969-0202, doi. 10.2307/2852096. The latter one is from Cambridge, of course. With the update and iteration, the current tomato sauce is not much similar to the ketchup of the 17th century. Just like the ancestor of the cat is the ancient cat beast, it is a kind of origin connection. Then Su Yun looked around. As time went by, the outdoor temperature became lower and lower. Mr. Newton, please try it. It is a very common sauce in our East. Not only is it not toxic, but some people have eaten it and become the 5 whites of the Central Plains, and have become rich. Hearing this, Xiaoniu couldn't help but look at the ketchup in front of him again, with a hesitant expression, although he didn't want to admit it. This Oriental man named Fatty did bring him a lot of good things and helped him a lot since he appeared. Thinking of this, Xiaoniu was determined in his heart and took a potato on his own initiative. Anyway, he wouldn't die. So he tried a little. The skin of the baked potato was a little hot. Xiaoniu quickly changed the potato between his hands and kept breathing out of his mouth. With the help of the cold air, the temperature of the potato surface quickly dropped. Xiaoniu pinched a slightly concave part with familiarity and applied a little force. As a puff of white smoke rose, the potato was split in 2. Then he took the smaller half in his hand, dipped it in the ketchup prepared by Su Yun, and stuffed it into his mouth along with the potato. After a while, Xiaoniu exclaimed, It tastes good, delicious. At that time, the seasonings in Britain were very poor. Bread wrapped in butter was basically the most common configuration. In addition, Bacon was used to pickle vegetables, and then it was made into an early simple salad with pomegranate seeds and peeled lime. Therefore, the appearance of ketchup can be regarded as filling the gap between sweet and sour. Its popularity has been verified countless times in later generations. It is no exaggeration to say that this thing and Europeans can really be regarded as a condiment that fits innately. Looking at Xioniu, who had already taken a second bite, Su-Yun smiled slightly and said, "Then Mr. Newton, if we set a low price for ketchup and sell it, do you think anyone would be willing to pay for it?" Sell? Pay? Click. Hearing these two key words, Xioniu's whole body was like a vibrator that had been disconnected from the power supply, and he suddenly stood there in a daze. He didn't even notice that the potato in his hand fell to the ground. After a few seconds, a light suddenly appeared in his eyes, like two gold coins embedded in them, shining with golden light. Yesterday, the ratio of those who disliked and liked the title of the book reached 10-1. ITM. Chapter 34, William's Choice. The next morning, William's house. The warm sun of the winter morning danced on the branches in patches, descending from the sky and lingering, illuminating every speck of dust in the air, and slightly evaporating the cold of the night into mist. Today is the first day of the new week, and William Esque was not prepared to do too much work. Taking advantage of the warm morning sun, he moved his old recliner outside, squinting his eyes, wearing a blackened blanket, and enjoying a rare leisure time. However, he didn't enjoy it for long. In the haze, he heard a loud sound in his ears. To be precise, it was the sound of the fence being knocked open. Everyone knows that fences, whether they are abroad or at home, can't stand up to brute force cracking for a long time, but under normal circumstances, most people don't do this. It was broad daylight, and even thieves would not come to the door at this time. Therefore, William Askew had only one thought in his mind: oh my God, could it be the Dutch who are attacking? In 1665, it was the middle of the famous Anglo-Dutch War. John Bull and the Netherlands fought a total of 4 major battles and countless minor battles. Although Woolsthorpe is located inland, there might be a small team sneaking in to harass the enemy behind the enemy lines. Thinking of this, William Askew subconsciously let out a low roar. He was just about to get up and run to the cowshed to pick up a cow dung stick to fight as Lubu, when a face appeared in front of him, whose facial features were distorted with excitement, but whose eyebrows and voice were very familiar. "Uncle William, Uncle William. Wake up. Wake up." Seeing this, William Esque's brain froze for several seconds, and then his voice suddenly rose. "Little Isaac? You, with thick eyebrows and big eyes, also betrayed Great Britain." A trace of doubt appeared visibly on Xioniu's face, but he quickly put it behind his mind. He gently pulled William's sleeve and said in a low voice, "Uncle William, I tell you, we are going to get rich." William was sobered up by Xioniu's pull. He frowned and asked, "Little Isaac, what happened?" Xioniu did not answer him directly, but looked around vigilantly, raised his chin and nodded at the house. "Uncle William, let's go in and talk. What are you doing?" William looked at Xioniu, who was not sure what was going on, and then at Su-Yun, who was following him with a package. He hesitated and let them into the house. "Forget it, come with me." As soon as he entered the house, Xioniu rushed to the window and pulled down a somewhat torn curtain. Then, he rarely chatted with Lisa, and took Su-Yun to the dining table. At this time, in addition to Su-Yun, Xioniu, William, Lisa and Mrs. William, only Lilani was present among the remaining 3 sisters. It is worth mentioning that compared with the last time, this naughty child seemed to be more well-behaved, at least there was not much mud on his face. Then Xioniu put Su-Yun's package on the table, quickly took out a few baked potatoes from it, dipped them in sauce, and handed them to William and the others. "Uncle William, try this first, and, Lisa, Lilani, you guys try it too." William took the potato, put it in front of his nose, and twitched his nose a few times. "What is this? Strawberry jam?" Xioniu shook his head and kept it a secret. "You'll know after you try it." William hesitated for a moment, but out of trust in Xioniu, he finally ate half of the potato. The potatoes were just taken out of the oven by Xioniu not long ago. Although they cooled down a little along the way, they were still a little warm under Su-Yun's deliberate protection, which was just right for cooking. As soon as the sticky potatoes entered his mouth, William's taste buds were filled with a wonderful taste of sweet and sour. This taste was not as refreshing as mint, but it made people feel a little happy and their appetite was instantly opened. William's left hand and lips holding the potato seemed to be out of control. Before his brain could respond to the next stage, He pushed and bit, swallowing the whole potato. Then he chewed the potato mechanically, staring at his fingers in a daze, which were still stained with a little bright red sauce. After a while, he looked at Xiaoniu and asked, "Little Isaac, what is this?" Xiaoniu didn't keep it a secret this time. He touched Lalani, who was licking her fingers, and said, "Ketchup." The ketchup that Xiaoniu mentioned was not ketchup, but the transliteration of ketchup. Therefore, William immediately understood the raw material of this thing and exclaimed, "Tomato? God, isn't that poisonous?" After saying that, he stepped forward to stop Lalani's subsequent behavior. Seeing this, Suyun, who had been prepared, smiled slightly, took the initiative to step forward, and repeated what he had said to Xiaoniu before. As mentioned before, William is also a graduate of Cambridge University, and he obtained a degree in natural sciences. According to the popularization of education in 1665, it was almost equivalent to a doctoral degree from a 985 university in later generations. Combined with some of his experiences in the past few years, William was quickly led by Suyun to the same idea as Xiaoniu before, and was successfully persuaded. Ketchup. William glanced at Lilani, who was gnawing on potatoes dipped in ketchup, and asked Suyun, "Mr. Fiu, are you saying that this is a special sauce from the East, and you are willing to share its recipe with us?" Suyun nodded, and looked at him calmly. "Yes, this is a sauce developed by an Eastern chef named Yuan Hao. It is very simple to mix. If Mr. William is willing, we can partner in this business." William looked deeply at the young man from the East, his face still full of confusion. "Mr. Fiu, since you have mastered such a technology, why don't you choose to do it alone?" "Of course it's because of my friendship with Mr. Newton." Suyun patted his chest, put on an expression of I and Xiaoniu were loyal to each other, then sighed, and said, "According to the current situation of the Black Death in London, I'm afraid I have to stay in Woolsthorpe for a while, and I can't contact my parents for the time being. I can't stay here and eat and drink for free, right? In addition, the market for ketchup is definitely not small, and may even be European level, but its copying cost is too low to achieve monopoly. If I choose to work alone, I am afraid that before I can sell it to Grantham, a lot of imitations will appear on the street. Rather than making less money, it is better for everyone to work together to think of ways to make more guineas during the window period of cracking the technology." After saying this, Suyun looked at William calmly and stopped talking. His explanation was true and false, not all lies, nor all facts. The false part was naturally the reason for bringing out the technology, and the true part was his judgment on the copying market. At present, the biggest production barrier for ketchup in the UK, or in all European countries except Italy and Spain, is not the formula, but the inherent concept that tomatoes are poisonous. The method of making ketchup is actually very simple. You only need to cook and mash the tomatoes first, then add sugar, salt and blending oil. Suyun used butter at the beginning, and stir slowly according to a certain proportion. This technology is not so outrageous that it can be cracked in 1 or 2 days, but it will take at most 2 weeks. After all, if it is a complicated process, Suyun can't do it so easily, right? Once people's perception of the poisonousness of tomatoes begins to change, ketchup will be everywhere in a few days. Just like the local cold noodles, the national cold noodles market is definitely not small, but have you seen any person or company monopolizing it? In some small counties, you can even see Shanxi cold noodles spoken in the local dialect. This is the inevitable result of the absence of technical barriers, and it is also one of the reasons why Suyun chose ketchup. The taste of ketchup is inherently in line with Europeans, but due to the short replication window period, the time to make money is relatively limited. This can not only improve the living conditions of Xiaoniu and William's family, but also will not lead Xiaoniu's future life trajectory astray. If it is replaced with other things with technical barriers such as soap or masturbation cups, Xiaoniu may be obsessed with money all his life. The sight returns to the house. Looking at the ketchup in front of him, William thought for a while and said, "Mr. Fiu, I have no objection to doing business together, but the specific profit-sharing ratio, Mr. William." Just when William was about to discuss the distribution of benefits, Suyun suddenly interrupted him. "Mr. William, we can talk about the profit-sharing ratio later, because we are still missing one person, an indispensable partner." Hearing this, William and Xiaoniu looked at each other and asked together, "What person?" "Think about it." Suyun pointed to the ketchup on the table and explained, "For educated people like you two, You have to be guided to figure out the reason why tomatoes are lethal. What about ordinary people? With the knowledge reserves of those civilians, I am afraid they can't even understand the reaction that acid can dissolve lead. How do you convince them to buy ketchup? Just because the taste suits their preferences? This is obviously impossible. No one is willing to die for a little delicious food. Soo-yoon looked at the two people in front of him who were thinking, smiled and spread his hands. So we must find a person of high moral character who can gain the trust of others with the simplest words, such as, Pastor Yerlin of St. Diptodia Church. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 35 Authoritative Endorser. Pastor Yarlin. William was stunned when he heard the name Soo-yoon called out. Then he flattened his left hand and knocked his right fist upward. Yes, you can find Pastor Yarlin. In the European Reformation in the 16th century, Protestantism broke away from the Roman Catholic Church and became one of the three major JDJ schools in later generations. From an objective point of view, the Protestantism in the 16th to 18th centuries was indeed worthy of the word new in terms of reputation and actions. For example, the most famous thing is that they abolished indulgences. They believed that people could contact God on their own without the need for priests to do it for them. That is, they abolished the intermediary from the position of faith. The Protestantism in Britain is more complicated. Although Britain also started Protestantism after the Reformation, the reason has little to do with doctrine. The Protestantism in Britain was purely because the king wanted to divorce, but the Catholic Church disagreed and said there was no way. So the king simply abandoned Catholicism and established himself as the supreme leader of British Protestantism, and it continues to this day. That is to say, if the long-distance runner falls behind first, then the successor will also become the supreme leader of Protestantism. Therefore, many pastors of British Protestantism today actually have certain connections with the royal palace. They are not pure Puritans, and they are allowed to own industries in public. The pros and cons of this point are naturally a matter of opinion, but at least in terms of rules, Protestant pastors can do business with others at this time. And the credibility of pastors at this time. How to say it, although it is not as outrageous as the Middle Ages when people can be fooled at will, it is still easy to do a live broadcast with goods. Especially in Lincolnshire, Yarlin's reputation has reached an extreme value both in the official and private sectors. Just like Pukunshin, a local, recommends cheat pots to ants, the order success rate is simply outrageous. Therefore, when Soo-yoon proposed this name, William and Zioniu did not hesitate at all and directly agreed to Soo-yoon's idea of bringing Yarlin into the group. Early the next morning. Grantham. St. Titus Church. The white-haired Yarlin was wearing a coarse linen shirt and was wiping a chair after worship with some effort. In the practice room not far behind him, the choir was practicing a hymn. Yarlin's full name is Yarlin Dillett. He is 59 years old this year. He graduated from St. John's College, Cambridge, and has been qualified as a pastor for more than 30 years. In addition to his pastoral duties, he also holds corresponding political positions in the town of Grantham, and his family also owns a large estate in North Lincoln. But Yarlin's private life is not extravagant, and it can even be said to be a bit monotonous. On weekdays, in addition to reading the Bible and praying, he goes to Sunday school to teach children. He eats and lives in the church, and his character is exactly the same as his appearance. After all, Protestantism itself is a product of separation from Catholicism. Although there are many black materials in the next 100 or 200 years, it is still relatively clean in the early days of the new rise. For example, when Zioniu was able to enter Trinity College, Yarlin also made a lot of efforts, and the letter of introduction borrowed his name. Of course. Even in this period, people like Yarlin were a minority after all, and other people had some worldly desires to a certain extent. Knock, knock, knock. Just as Yarlin was about to return to the prayer room to read the holy book, there was a knock on the door of the church. Yarlin quickly put down the rag, cleared his throat, and responded, "May God have mercy, I'm coming. Today is Tuesday, not the regular time for worship," but Yarlin was not surprised by someone visiting. Even in later generations, some churches in Europe often have people visiting during the week, generally involving confession, resolving doubts or funerals. Yarlin walked quickly to the door, took out the key, and unlocked the door. As a ray of light shone in, Yerlin's linen clothes were also stained with a little light, looking a bit like Gandalf the Grey in The Lord of the Rings. He first covered his eyes with one hand, slightly adjusted to the light, and raised his eyebrows in surprise after seeing the people coming. "Oh, my God, Mr. William, little Isaac, and Mr. Fatty, right? Why are you here?" Opposite him, Soo-yoon's mouth twitched slightly. "Damn, is the name Fatty so easy to say?" Looking at Yerlin with a surprised look on his face, William and Xiaoniu hugged him one after another, and then said, "Pastor Yerlin, we want to talk to you about something. Can we go in and talk?" Yerlin's eyes quickly swept over the three people and nodded, "Of course, please follow me." After that, he led the three people into the church and came to a reception room. The reception room was very simple, with a few benches and a table, plus an oil lamp, and some books and letters on the table. Hallelujah! After taking his seat, Yerlin glanced at William with some curiosity and asked, "Mr. William, I don't see you at this time on weekdays. What's the matter? Did something happen?" Then he looked at the uncontrollable joy on William's face, and suddenly an idea flashed in his mind. He looked at Xiaoniu in a daze. "Let me guess, are little Isaac and Lisa going to get engaged, so they came here to coordinate the wedding venue today?" No. Hearing what Yerlin said, Xiaoniu on the side couldn't sit still and waved his hands frantically. I didn't. Don't talk nonsense, Pastor Yerlin." Yerlin was stunned when he saw this, and his eyes gently glanced at Soo-yoon, and then he thought of something. Could it be Lisa and Mr. Fatfish? No, either. Yerlin's breathing stagnated for a few seconds, and the look in his eyes when he looked at Soo-yoon suddenly became a little strange. Could it be you and Mr. Fatfish? Stop. Seeing that the respected old man was about to imagine the scene of three people coming out together, Soo-yoon quickly interrupted his self-indulgence. "It's not an emotional problem, Mr. William. Please explain it quickly." William nodded gently, and his expression at this time was also vaguely subtle. If I'm not mistaken, when Xiaoniu mentioned his eldest daughter, he seemed to be a little excited. Could it be that he was hiding something from me? However, this thought only flashed through his mind. After all, there were more important things at the moment. "Pastor Yerlin, this is it." Then William took out a small can of ketchup and introduced the whole thing to Yerlin in detail. In addition to the formula, he basically told everything. If you are interested, you can add a share in the name of an individual or a church. Don't worry, tomatoes are absolutely not toxic. This must be a business that is pleasing to God. William deliberately avoided the topic of the formula, which was also a backup for them. If Yerlin wanted to leave himself alone, it would take at least 2 weeks to decipher ketchup without a formula. Don't think that homemade ketchup only needs 4 ingredients. They are the best ratios optimized after repeated attempts. At this time, Mrs. William had already started making ketchup at home with several daughters. If the worst happened, William could immediately leave for big cities such as Lincoln. Even if there is no guarantee from a person with high credibility, some money can be made. Tomatoes. Yerlin stretched out his withered fingers, gently dipped a little red sauce, and observed it in front of his eyes. In fact, more than 20 years ago, scholars in England questioned the claim that tomatoes are poisonous. It is very popular among the common people in Spain, but the mortality rate is not as high as rumored, and it is even several orders of magnitude lower. When I visited the Spanish Ligerian College, I saw edible tomatoes on the fruit platter of the succession banquet. I tried one at that time and there was no sign of poisoning. However, this is the first time I have seen a viscous sauce made from other recipes. Judging from the taste, there should be something else added, right? Looking at Yerlin, who was talking freely, William was a little confused. "Reverend Yerlin, what do you mean?" Yerlin thought for a while and said, "I agree to participate in the shares, but not in my own name, but in the name of the Grantham Diocese. The diocese can provide sales channels and manpower, but there are 2 things you must guarantee for me." Chapter 36 Intention Achieved. Inside the church. Upon hearing Yerlin's reply, William was slightly stunned. Which 2 points? Yerlin pondered for a few seconds and raised a finger. First, the church must arrange for the ketchup to be eaten and observed for 2 weeks. It can only be sold after it is completely confirmed that it is not toxic. If you are worried about the formula being leaked, I can pay you a 5-guinea advance in the name of the parish. Upon hearing this, William secretly looked at Xiaoniu and Soo-yoon. It was mentioned before. The income of an average family in today's society is about 0.65 guineas, and 5 guineas is about 8 years of income. According to the annual income of 60,000 for a family in later generations, it is about 500,000. This price is so small that it can be ignored for the potential market of ketchup. After all, bread and potatoes are staple foods in this era. The ketchup market in Europe must be measured in 10,000 guineas at least. But the same thing. If a product can easily break through the technical barriers, it is difficult to monopolize its potential market no matter how large it is. Especially in this turbulent era unless you nationalize it through policies and prohibit private production. According to the previous estimates of Su Yun and others, without an authoritative endorser, they could only earn 5-8 guineas at most. Not to mention that Su Yun was very clear about Yarlin's resume. This pastor was indeed a reliable person with good character. According to the historical trajectory, 6 years later, Yarlin would get a fortune of 150 guineas, but he only left himself 10 guineas for retirement. The rest was donated to the church according to the Protestant tithe, and the rest was used to help the poor. Today, there is a restored soup kitchen in the town of Grantham to commemorate this pastor. After Yarlin's death, the Protestant church also established a Yarlin fund for him. On the day the fund was established, the Mavericks donated £40. The pound had already been issued at that time. And this £40 was also the only donation in the Mavericks' life with a physical receipt. Faced with a huge sum of 150 guineas, Yarlin chose to donate it casually, not to mention the uncertain future of ketchup. Therefore, Su Yun secretly winked at William, indicating that he could agree to it. William obviously had the same mentality, and quickly nodded and said, "No problem, Pastor Yarlin." Yarlin nodded slightly, picked up the cup on the table and took a sip of water, and continued, "As for the second thing, the church will hold 70% of the shares." 70% of the shares. William's voice suddenly rose a few notes. Although he quickly regained his composure, the rise and fall of his chest still showed that he was not calm in his heart. "Pastor Yarlin, isn't this ratio a bit too high? The ketchup was the recipe that Su Yun brought out, Zionia was a middleman, and William himself provided a relatively stable backing. Therefore, leaving aside the church, the distribution of interests among the three parties should be at least 4-3-3. If Su Yun is determined, it is normal for him to take half. If the church holds 70% of the shares, wouldn't his family's actual share be less than 10%? Seeing William getting a little excited, Yarlin waved his hand at him, signaling him not to be anxious. "Mr. William, can you please listen to me first?" Then he paused and continued, "First of all, there is the cost of ketchup materials. Although I haven't seen the specific formula, I am sure that sugar must be included. Am I right, Mr. William?" Hearing the word sugar, William stopped talking immediately. Europe in the 17th century was not like later generations, where you could buy a bag of white sugar for $2.50. During this period, sugar in Europe could not be called a food. It was more used as a medicine, or it was an item used by those rich and powerful people to show off their power and wealth. The reason for using sugar as a medicine was mainly because many people suffered from chronic malnutrition at that time. Sugar has a high calorie content and is a special medicine that can take effect immediately under any circumstances. At this time, the price of 100 grams of sugar was about 8 to 9 pence, equivalent to 1/20 of a family's annual income. The little bit of sugar from Zioniu's family was a reserve resource that William and his wife gave to Zioniu. If Zioniu had not been considering the problem of infinite series at that time, Su Yun would have had little chance of taking it away smoothly. If the church chose to cooperate with William's family, at that time, the least they would be looking forward to was the market of a town like Grantham. The pre-production cost was obviously not a small number, and it had to be borne by the church. Looking at William, whose momentum was gradually weakening, Yarlin smiled again. In addition to the cost, the Grantham diocese can also provide more advanced channels, not to mention the far away, at least covering 1/5 of the East Midlands is not difficult. Mr. William, you are also a businessman. You should understand the difference between 100 people buying and 10,000 people buying, don't you think? 100% of the sales of 100 people make a profit, and 10% of the sales of 10,000 people make a profit, but the latter's profit is 10 times that of the former. This is a problem that even Lilani can convert. Thinking of this, William couldn't help but glance at Su Yun. Su Yun shrugged lightly, indicating that he had no objection. The two reasons given by Yarlin were very sufficient. In addition, Su Yun himself could not bring back any money he earned in this era, so there was no need for him to be too fussy. Seeing this, William had to give up the competition on the big board and turn to the details. Mr. Yarlin, what you said makes sense, but I think 70% is still a bit high. How about 64%? There is also the issue of advance payment. I hope to get at least 8 guineas. At this stage of calculating pennies, William naturally changed the address from pastor to sir. After all, the word pastor was a bit embarrassing in such a mercenary occasion. Then the two had a discussion and finally reached an agreement. Yarlin signed a ketchup profit-sharing agreement with William on behalf of the Grantham parish, with the two parties sharing 6.5, 3.5. The two parties will conduct a week of edible observation. If everything goes well, they will officially enter the mass production stage. At the same time, Yarlin will pay William 7 guineas as a guaranteed advance payment. The advance payment is an advance payment of the profit-sharing agreement, but it also has the nature of a guaranteed minimum. That is, when the ketchup is divided, the church will first deduct a base number of 7 before dividing it. However, if the total profit does not exceed 7 guineas, William does not need to return the money. Then both parties press their fingerprints on the agreement one after another. In this era when civil law is gradually sprouting, this kind of agreement has a very high legal effect. More than a year ago, in March 1664, a civilian used a similar agreement to win a lawsuit against a knight in Wimbledon. More than 10 minutes later, the three walked out of the church gate. Xioniu touched the 3 guineas in his pocket, 2 for Xioniu himself and 1 for Su Yun as meal money, and his face couldn't help but smile. Chapter 37 Goodbye Hook. 3 days later. At noon. Dadada, on a road that was 4 or 5 meters wide and much better quality than ordinary rammed stone roads, a hay cart was swaying along the southeast direction. The creaking sound of the joints was like a worn-out old harmonica, singing the hardship of life. In addition to a lot of potatoes and vegetables, there were 3 men sitting in the back of the hay cart. The leader was a middle-aged man, and the rest were 2 young men, one of whom had black hair and black eyes. They were Xioniu, Su Yun and William. After receiving 7 guineas from Pastor Yarlin 3 days ago, William's family, who were relatively wealthy, first spent 10 shillings to buy some daily necessities and food, and enjoyed a bin meal for the first time in a whole year. Then everyone rested for a day, and this morning they found a hay cart that was on the way and rushed to Lincoln City, the county town of Lincolnshire. County is the second-level division in the UK, which is divided into honorary counties and urban counties in nature. In 1665, there were 27 of the former and only 4 of the latter. In the 21st century, these numbers will become 34 and 6. Lincolnshire is a standard honorary county, with a resident sheriff who represents the British royal family but has no real power. He only has a few functions such as geographical name and coordination of civil affairs within the scope. The head of Lincolnshire is the city of Lincoln, a very, very small city in the local area, so small that you may not be able to find it if you search without adding the prefix British. The hay cart drove for a while in the sun. After about half an hour, the driver pulled the horse. 3 gentlemen, we have arrived at Lincoln City. Su Yun and the other 2 looked at each other and stood up one after another. He shook off the potato dust on his body, picked up the bag, and got off the car neatly from the pedal. Then William took the initiative to walk to the front of the car and took out a small piece of dried meat from his pocket. Mr. Wenger, this piece of venison is the toll we agreed on earlier. Thank you for the journey. The driver called Wenger was a thin old man with dark skin. After taking the dried meat handed by William, he opened his mouth and showed his big yellow teeth. Mr. William, you are so polite. Shall we meet here tonight? William nodded. See you tonight. After taking care of the driver, William turned around and waved to Su Yun and the others. Okay, Isaac, Mr. Fatty, let's go into the city. Fatty and Xioniu said at the same time and followed William to the entrance. In 1665, people in Britain who walked into the city did not need to pay a city tax, but if you had a house in the city, you had to pay a stove tax. In addition, trucks like Wenger who came from afar also did not charge money if they were empty, but they would be stopped if they had supplies. With a sentence that the supplies were not available, you had to pay obediently. Su Yun and the other 2 did not have to worry about the city tax, so they walked into Lincoln City easily. At present, the total population of the main urban area of Lincoln City is about 40,000 to 50,000. It is not big in Europe at this time, but it is not small either. The local era is the 4th year of Kangxi in the Qing dynasty, and the population of the 2 lakes combined is only more than 500,000. At the same time, compared with the small town of Grantham, the buildings in Lincoln City are much more upscale, and landmark buildings such as the Opera House and the restaurant are quite conspicuous. If you look closely, you can occasionally see some rich people in luxurious clothes passing by in a carriage. In short, when you come to the county head, you can feel some of the aristocratic style of the 17th century. Of course, the two tallest buildings are still the bell tower and the church. After entering the city, William looked around, pulled Zioniu and Suyun to a gorgeous attic, and said, "Little Isaac, Mr. Fatty, this place is very easy to recognize. Let's take this as the agreed place and meet here in 3 hours. Is that okay?" Suyun and Zioniu nodded in unison. "No problem, Uncle, Mr. William." Then the three of them separated. William's purpose of coming to Lincoln this time was to buy sugar. Although the right to make ketchup had been granted to Yarlin, William and his team could not really leave no tricks behind. Making some ketchup just in case was the best choice. And if you want to make ketchup, you naturally cannot do without the raw material of sugar. Due to different sources of goods and transportation costs, the price of sugar in towns, counties, and even the capital of England is different at this time. The county capital is the cheapest, and it will fluctuate a lot in towns. In addition, the sugar William wants to buy this time will not be less than 3 guineas, and it is too unsafe to be in a small town like Little Grantham with a population of thousands. The British also understand the principle of not showing off wealth. As for the purpose of Suyun and Zioniu coming to Lincoln, there is naturally only one, to find Hook Yage Hotel in the southwest of the city. After parting with William, Suyun and Zioniu searched all the way according to the address left by Hook, and finally stopped in front of another 3-story building. The building is located in the wealthy area in the southwest of the city. The streets are relatively clean, at least you won't be approached by someone with a bucket and splashed with a large pool of alcohol next to you. There is a cross on the top of the building, indicating that it is a church property and has an official origin. Below the cross hangs a plaque with the words Song of Songs in Hebrew. Yage Hotel. This should be it. There were no waiters at the entrance of the hotel in this era, and the so-called lobby was actually only 20 to 30 square meters. Zioniu and the other two came to the front desk smoothly. "Hello, does Mr. Robert Hook live here?" The boss of the front desk was a short and fat middle-aged man with a wisp of goatee. Hearing this, he raised his eyelids and looked at the two of them. "Mr. Hook? He lives here. What do you want to do with him?" After confirming that Hook was here, Zioniu tightened his hands hidden in his sleeves and said, "We have an appointment with him. Can we contact him?" "Just say that Barrow's student Isaac Newton wants to see him." The short and fat man put down his pen and carefully looked at Suyun and the other two again, with a hint of hesitation on his face. It was new now. Without knowing whether the guests were taking a nap, he had to weigh the possible risk of complaints. This was the church's industry, and he could only be regarded as a powerful employee, similar to a lobby manager. As the top hotel in Lincoln City, he had also encountered many people who had found out the names of guests through certain channels, or wanted money or connections. After more than 10 seconds, the short and fat man finally made a decision. He picked up a pen from the table, wrote a simple paragraph on a piece of paper, and handed it to Zioniu. "Barrow and Isaac Newton, are these two names written like this?" Zioniu took the paper and looked at it for a few seconds, and nodded. "That's right." The short and fat man took back the paper, stuffed it into a small basket beside him, and shook another line. Soon, a response came from the second floor. Someone pulled the rope from above and slowly pulled the basket up. After a while, there was a sound of footsteps on the roof. Ring, ring, ring. After about 2 or 3 minutes, a bell on the left side of the front desk suddenly made a crisp sound. Seeing this, the short and fat man breathed a sigh of relief. There are 2 answering bells at the front desk. The left one represents the guest's consent or permission, and the right one represents denial. Then he looked at the account book again and reported a room number to Zioniu and the other two. "Second floor, room 233. Someone will take you there after you go up the stairs." Suyun thanked the store owner on behalf of Zioniu, and the two of them went up the stairs. The old-style attic stairs were a little shaky when walking up, and it felt a bit like a dangerous building. If the UN Platinum Writers Salon was held in this hotel, it would probably collapse after 2 or 3 authors walked by. However, the combined size of Suyun and Zioniu was not as big as an ear, so the two of them walked to the second floor easily. As soon as they went upstairs, a short waiter came up to greet them. Then, under his guidance, Soo-yoon and the other two walked straight along the narrow corridor and finally arrived outside the house. At this time, the door lock of the house had been opened from the inside, and it was half closed. Some tobacco smell could be faintly smelled from it. The waiter made a gesture to Soo-yoon and the other two to knock on the door by their own, bowed slightly, and turned to say goodbye. After the waiter left, Zion-yu went up and knocked on the door. Mr. Hooker, I am Isaac Newton. Chapter 38, Killing People and Destroying Their Hearts. Just a few seconds after Zion-yu knocked on the door, a male voice came from inside the room. The owner of the voice was Hook. Come in. Zion-yu took a deep breath and pushed open the door with Soo-yoon. The guest room where Hook lived was a one-bedroom and one living room. This kind of specification, which was marked as a suite by most hotels in later generations and was very expensive, was a standard configuration in the 17th century. At this time, the bedroom door had been closed. Hook was sitting on the desk in the living room opposite the door, smoking a pipe in one hand and flipping through a book with the other hand. Seeing Zion-yu and the other person appear, he did not stand up to greet them, but leaned back in his chair comfortably. Student Newton, it's only been a while. Oh, 4 days, right? Why did you come to my door so soon? Could it be that you can't contact Barrow? Or have you solved that problem? Hook's last sentence was obviously sarcastic, looking down from a high position with a deep gaze. In his opinion, the purpose of Zion-yu's visit must be to inform him that he could not contact Barrow. 4 days is obviously not enough time for a long-distance letter, and if Barrow is in Lincolnshire, he will definitely come with Zion-yu to find him today. He knows Barrow well. He has a little sense of responsibility. Even if he can't figure out the problem, he will not let his students come to his house to take the blame. Therefore, it is obvious that there is only one possibility at the moment. Zion-yu went home and searched for it, and found that he had lost his teacher's contact address, or was told that the mail was temporarily stopped due to the epidemic, and finally had no choice but to come to the door to inform him of the matter. At the same time, this action also foreshadowed another point. He tried to calculate the problem, but was powerless. As for the possibility of Zion-yu solving this problem, he would rather believe that someone derived this specific formula of gravity when he was alive, and he didn't believe that such a young man could solve his own problem. Even if he was the first reduced-fee student in Trinity College in 15 years, it would never be possible. Just as Hook was thinking about how to taunt Maverick, he heard Maverick's voice with a somewhat inexplicable meaning. Yes, Mr. Hook, I solved the problem. I know, it is indeed difficult with your ability. Wait, Hook was originally prepared to continue to taunt him, but as he was speaking, he suddenly realized something was wrong. The smile on his face froze and he stood there in a daze. He was stunned for more than 10 seconds before he suddenly sat up straight in his chair and stared at Zion-yu. What did you just say? Zion-yu shrugged, took out a written document from his pocket and handed it to him. The solution is here, provided that you can understand it, Mr. Hooker. Nonsense, this is impossible. Hooker cursed, snatched Zion-yu's document without any grace, spread it out on the table, and started reading. A specific vibration frequency corresponds to a specific curve derivative with respect to coordinates. The linear string formula within the unit cell r equals plus I plus xkis 2 Greek letter alpha plus xkis 2 Greek letter alpha is wonderful, wonderful. DL equals xcos plus citizen xyn Greek letter epsilon Greek letter alpha equals DLDZ equals plus I slash 2 plus xi slash 2, cos 2 Greek letter alpha, xi slash 2, sin 2 Greek letter alpha. Someone asked me what the equation was, and I wrote it out this time. Horizontal displacement S equals Greek letter epsilon 1, and then, while calculating, Hook's pen suddenly stopped at one of the positions. He drew a horizontal line under 0 and asked Zion-yu, what does this mean? Seeing that it involved the core issue of his current research, Zion-yu naturally would not reveal it casually. Don't look at this person who is narrow-minded and particularly irritable, but in fact he is very cunning, and Hook was tricked when deriving the law of universal gravitation. So Zion-yu casually hummed, it's just an abbreviation of approaching, which can be seen as a decreasing trend of the minus first power level. Mr. Hook, you can draw stress distribution curve on the center height line, and the displacement approaches the load side. You will find that the position where the three stress fields tend to be consistent is twice the distance to the load boundary. Zion-yu's tone seemed very relaxed, with a sense of those who understand. But in fact, this passage contains a lot of key information, especially the second half. This sentence actually involves the content of St. Venant's theorem, which is a basic theorem proposed by the Gallic scientist St. Venant in 1855, which is still about 200 years ago. But after being processed by Su Yun, it became the work of the all-round genius Hanli. St. Venant applied a lot of basic concepts of infinitesimal in the derivation of the zero-force system and the problem of strain energy density. Therefore, there is a very subtle equivalent recursion between the two sides, which can be used to explain the concept of infinitesimal. Anyway, before the generalized Hooke's law was proposed, no one knew what the equivalent force system was. At most, the stress field trend can be attributed to the position phenomenon. Xionius claimed that he created a new mathematical tool may attract some hatred, but saying that a phenomenon that conforms to a certain law was observed in the experiment, even Hooke would not say anything about this explanation. Of course. This is also related to the fact that Hooke's problem only involves Taylor's second-order expansion. Except for some calculations, the whole process does not require the use of the mathematical tool of calculus in most cases. Only the interpretation of the concepts is needed. Therefore, after Xionius discovered a bug 200 years in advance to cover up the true meaning of infinitesimal quantities, Hooke quickly deduced a completely new result. When Z and I remain unchanged, is this an elastic force within a logical framework? Wait, that's not right. While calculating, Hooke suddenly raised his head. What about the stress-strain relationship? How do you derive the linear strain of the space occupied by the medium? Looking at Hooke, who looked crazy as if he had seen the author's broken chapter, Xionius spread his hands to him and said innocently, "I'm sorry, Mr. Hooke, Professor Barrow only taught me this much knowledge. If you want to know the follow-up content, you can wait until the epidemic is over and come to Trinity College to ask for advice in person. With his personality, I believe he will patiently answer your questions." Patiently, you are daydreaming. As soon as Xionius finished speaking, Hooke stood up abruptly, his face looking extremely scary in the shady environment. "If you want me to ask him questions, wait until the end of the world. Xiozei, I tell you, don't think it's so great to solve this problem. One day you will regret it. Regret being Barrow's student. Regret saying this today." Su Yun on the side looked at the helpless and furious Hooke and shook his head slightly in his heart. Fortunately this is in reality. If a question mark was put in at this time in the game, Hooke would probably be so angry that he would smash the computer. And next to Su Yun, Xionius was rarely angry at this time. Instead, he pouted his lips as if he deserved a beating. Mr. Hooke, whatever you think, I will not disturb you, please do as you please. After saying that, he pulled Su Yun and left the house. When he reached the door, Xionius suddenly thought of something, and said in an exaggerated "oh," and said to Su Yun, "Fei Yu, do you know where Teacher Barrow is now?" After a few days of getting along, Su Yun had some understanding of this great master, so although he was puzzled as to why he started this conversation, he still cooperated and said, "I don't know. Hey, the teacher is like this, he likes to run around everywhere, but with a teacher's wife by his side, he must be very happy." Teacher's wife? Yes, don't you know? The teacher's wife is called Ira Bryce, a great beauty. She is also a well-known academic master at Oxford University. However, 1 year in the exchange match between Cambridge and Oxford, she played against a teacher, and the teacher reversed the score with a series of 3 wins. Since then, she has started to pursue the teacher. Xionius hadn't finished speaking when there was a sound of heavy objects falling in the room behind him, and a voice with a little crying in the broken defense. "Get out." Chapter 39 Ketchup is on sale. After giving Hooke a precise blow, Xionius, who was in a good mood, invited Su Yun to the street to eat a lentil sandwich. Looking at the sign of the Yeje Hotel not far away, Su Yun chewed the dry bread, but couldn't help but feel a little emotional. According to the normal historical trajectory, a fire that would go down in history would occur in London in 1666. Because its impact was so far-reaching, historians even named the fire Great Fire. Hooke showed great architectural talent after the fire and directly participated in the reconstruction of London. Therefore, it was not until the end of 1668 that he had time to go to Trinity College to challenge Barrow. At that time, Barrow was helpless with the questions raised by Hooke. He was madly humiliated and ridiculed by Hooke in front of a group of students, and finally even alarmed the president of Cambridge University. Barrow fell seriously ill because of this. After recovering from the illness, he resigned from the position of Lucas Professor in 1669 and recommended Xionius as the next Lucas Professor. Later, Barrow gave up mathematics and began to study theology, which was quite similar to the local martial arts novels in which people see through the world and cut off their worries. Later, Barrow obtained a doctorate in theology in 1670, officially became the president of Trinity College in 1672, and was promoted to vice president of Cambridge University in 1675. Although this resume seems very beautiful, it recognizes Barrow's theological achievements, not mathematics. And since the end of 1673, Barrow has been bedridden and died in 1677. No one can say whether Barrow's untimely death has a direct relationship with Hooke's smashing of the scene, but there is an established fact that is very clear, that is, a top professor Lucas abdicated early and turned from mathematics to theology. At this time, Barrow had obtained the product and quotient of two functions and the differential theorem, which is a height that Zion can't reach at all now. In terms of research progress, he is actually the first person in the field of calculus at this time. Therefore, in some small circles, Barrow's evaluation is somewhat similar to that of the young General Chua in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, belonging to the kind of star general who fell prematurely. Now with the appearance of Su-Yun, Zion Yu, by chance, has averted a disaster for his teacher, but has also forged a grudge with Hooker. It is unknown whether it is good or bad. 12 days passed in a flash, and a new Sunday came in a blink of an eye. Grantham. St. Titus Church. Today, the entrance of the church is still crowded with people, and deep and magnificent hymns are faintly heard from the interior of the building. The battle is even bigger than when Su-Yun first came. This is the second week of November. According to the customs of the British Peninsula in the 17th century, on the second Sunday of each month, the whole of England will hold a large trade fair based on the 4th administrative district. The trade fair starts on Sunday afternoon and lasts until 2 or 3 o'clock on Monday afternoon. Therefore, the church's worship bell will ring an hour earlier on this day, and the worship process will also be exempted from the sacrament, so that everyone has enough time to buy or sell things. This kind of gathering seems to be organized spontaneously by the people. But in fact it is inseparable from and cannot be separated from the support of the parish. Therefore, in previous gatherings, the church would also sell some holy books, portraits of saints or drinks, etc. However, at this moment, the stalls belonging to the Grantham parish are different from the past. There are no holy books, no portraits, only fist-sized clay pots neatly arranged on a table. There are also 4 or 5 huge pottery jars behind the table, and Su-Yun, Zion Yu, William's family and several helpers wearing church clothes are standing next to the pottery jars. According to the agreement reached by Yerlin and William at the beginning, the parish will cover the sales range of ketchup to more than 1/5 of the East Midlands area, and Grantham is only a small part of the territory. At the same time, considering that this kind of non-religious business is somewhat inconsistent with the style of the church, Yerlin handed over the stalls of the gathering to William's family. The parish only deployed a few people to assist in statistical data, and was responsible for the dispatch of some materials. Mrs. William was wearing a cotton and linen dress, with a white headscarf on her head, and her hands were wiping on her apron anxiously. "Dear, how long will it take for the meeting to end?" William asked, was much calmer than his wife. He turned his head and looked at the bell tower in the town and said, "It should be soon, maybe in 5 to 10 minutes, Duong." Before William finished speaking, a low bell rang from the direction of the church. This was the church's adjourning bell, indicating the end of worship. In less than a moment, creak, the 2 heavy doors of the church slowly opened, and a stream of people and a body odor poured out. Mrs. Williams' expression became more and more nervous, and she hurriedly instructed Lisa and others, "Lisa, take a look at the position of the spoon. Elula, check if the lids of the jars are closed. Andrea, where are the potatoes? Bring out the potatoes quickly." The gathering place was located on a street next to the church, and the parish stall was at the front of the street, which was the only entrance. With the exclusive cross sign, anyone who comes here will definitely see this stall as soon as they walk into the street, unless they are a StarCraft player. Tiffany Bowley, who had just left the church, took her son Dino's hand, wrapped him in a somewhat leaky scarf, and asked with her head down, "Dino, tell Mom, did you listen carefully to the Sunday school class today?" The 8-year-old Dino jumped on the bricks on the ground and said happily, "Yes, today we are talking about the story of Job." "Hey, Mom, what is that?" Tiffany Bowley was originally listening to Dino's words with a smile, and subconsciously turned her head to see that Dino was pointing at the stall at the entrance of the market. She smiled and touched her son's head, and said, "Oh, that's the church stall. Let's go and take a look." Tiffany Bowley's husband is a tailor in Grantham. Because of his exquisite craftsmanship, his income is not low. The family basically has no worries about food and clothing, and is considered a middle-class family. In August this year, Tiffany Bowley bought a portrait of the Apostle Peter at a market and hung it at home. But a cat ran into her house not long ago and tore most of the portrait. So since the beginning of the month, she has been planning to buy a new portrait at the market. As a result, as soon as she led Dino to the side of the stall, she heard a male voice. "Hello, would you like some of the newly launched ketchup? It's free to try." Ketchup. Looking at the strange young man with black hair and black eyes in front of her, Tiffany Bowley swallowed a word she was about to say and asked curiously, "What is that?" The black-haired young man pushed a plate in front of her very familiarly, and took a small piece of potato cut into thin strips from the side. "This is a new type of sauce from the East, made with non-toxic tomatoes, guaranteed by the Grantham Parish. Look, there is also a handwritten letter from Pastor Yarlin. The quantity is limited and it will be sold out. You can try it first before making a decision." Tomato. Hearing this term, Tiffany Bowley couldn't help but show a trace of hesitation on her face. In her cognition, tomatoes are a poisonous food. Then she looked at the sign of Grantham Parish on the stall, and the several parish staff in church attire behind the stall. The trust brought by faith eventually gradually overwhelmed the impression brought by rumors. The tailor's wife carefully picked up a potato shred, lightly dipped it in ketchup, put it in her mouth and took a bite. After a moment, her eyes suddenly lit up. "How much is this thing?" Opposite him, Soo-yoon smiled at her and raised two fingers. 10 ounces of ketchup, only 2 pence. Chapter 40 Return to Reality. In the 21st century, the units of measurement used by various countries are generally grams and kilograms. But the concept of gram was actually proposed in 1795, when Gall defined it as the absolute weight of a cube of water with a capacity equal to 1/100th of a meter at the melting temperature of ice. Therefore, in the 17th century, the British still used the avoirdupois system, which was dram, ounce, pound, etc. The avoirdupois system is different from the troy system. 1 ounce in the avoirdupois system is approximately equivalent to 28.3495 grams, while the latter is 31.10346768 grams. By converting the former, it can be concluded that the 10 ounces mentioned by Soo-yoon is just over 280 grams, about half a caddy. It has been mentioned before. The cost of artificial ketchup is mainly sugar. 1 caddy of ketchup requires about 30 grams of sugar, which is about 18 ounces to 30 grams of sugar when converted into ounces. The current market price of sugar is about 8 pence per 100 grams, but the cost price of the parish is much lower, about 2 pence. You can refer to the internal price of tobacco or liquor. Sugar is even more expensive because it is dilute. Therefore, after some calculations, the cost of 10 ounces of ketchup is about 0.6 pence. Including other transportation, labor and miscellaneous items, it is about 0.8 pence. The cost of 0.8 is sold at 2 pence, which is actually a cheap price, according to normal thinking, under the premise that others can quickly copy the product and enter the market. The higher the price of the product, the better. But Grantham Parish is not a professional chamber of commerce after all. The religious cloak is destined to prevent them from cheating too much, otherwise it will be more than worth a loss if the reputation is damaged. Therefore, after some discussion, Yarlin finally set the price of ketchup at 2 pence per 10 ounces. When the market settles down in the future, this premium will not be criticized too much. If it doesn't work, use the blessing. Ahem, blessing this kind of buff. 10 ounces for 2 pence. Hearing Soo-yoon's offer, Tiffany Bowley made a simple calculation in her mind. The current per capita income in Britain is 0.65 guineas, which is 150 pence. On average, 1 pence can be earned every 2 days. Tiffany Bowley's family has a higher income than ordinary families. If they can settle down in Grantham, the annual income of the whole family can reach about 1.2 guineas. Thinking of this, Tiffany Bowley looked at the can next to her. "Excuse me, is this can 10 ounces? Soo-yoon nodded. "Yes, the standard 10 ounces. Tiffany Bowley nodded slightly. 10 ounces, 280 grams, of ketchup seems to be a lot. Even if you use it to spread bread and potatoes every day, you probably can't finish it in 10 days or half a month. It is much more expensive than butter, but much cheaper than sugar. Even ordinary families can afford it." So after a short hesitation, Tiffany Bowley made up her mind. Sir, please give me 10 ounces, okay? Soo-yoon quickly took a bottle and said in a low voice, Madam, this bottle is freshly made ketchup, taken from the back, and is fresher than the others. Don't tell anyone else. Tiffany Bowley was originally thinking about whether she could bargain, but she was immediately delighted when she heard it. She saw clearly that Soo-yoon did take the can from the back area. So she didn't bargain immediately and took out 2 pennies. Thank you so much. Please keep these 2 pennies. Soo-yoon politely took the money and handed it to the parish staff around him, watching them record a transaction. Then he looked around, and took advantage of the gap when no one came over to stuff the can of ketchup in front of him into the empty space at the back. Just as Soo-yoon was doing this operation secretly, someone suddenly touched his left arm. Soo-yoon turned around and found that a little girl, as big as a bean, stood beside him. The one who could walk around here freely was naturally not someone else, but William's little daughter, Leilani. But at this time, Leilani was holding not cow dung, but a cup of hot water. Soo-yoon blinked, seemed to understand something, and pointed at himself. For me, Leilani nodded. Seeing this, Soo-yoon couldn't help but flash a little surprise in his heart. This naughty child seems to be much more low-key and well-behaved since the last time they met. This is good. It doesn't mean that girls must be quiet and comply with the 3 obediences and 4 virtues, but at least they shouldn't be naughty children. Then he took the cup, blew it and scanned it, and found that there was nothing added to it, so he took a sip. Thank you, Leilani. Leilani was silent for a few seconds, and suddenly a word popped out of his mouth. I'm sorry last time. After speaking, this former naughty child turned around and ran away in small steps. Soo-yoon couldn't help scratching his head. This child, Tiffany Bowley's purchase process is just a microcosm of today's stalls. With a parish as a guarantee, the William family hardly needs to spend too much time and effort to sell cans of ketchup. Tasting, introduction, collecting money. The whole process is so simple. 3 hours later, today's market entered a closing stage. This is just the end of today. According to convention, the market will continue to open for 1 day tomorrow. St. Titus Church will temporarily vacate an internal area to provide a temporary place for vendors to stay overnight. In a sense, this is a bit like the exhibition with accommodation in the future, which is a means of stimulating the economy led by the government. Just when Soo-yoon was about to help clean up the venue, Zeon-woo suddenly pulled him aside mysteriously. Fat fish, we are going to make a fortune. Looking at this ancestor with stars in his eyes, Soo-yoon's curiosity aroused. Oh, Mr. Newton, how much ketchup did you sell today? Zeon-woo looked around vigilantly and whispered a number, 900 pounds. Hearing this number, even Soo-yoon couldn't help but smack his lips. Wow, 900 pounds, 900 pounds, that is, more than 14,000 ounces. According to William's specification of 10 ounces per can, that is more than 1,400 cans of ketchup. You know, the permanent population of the entire Grantham main city is only 3,000-4,000 people. Even during the market period, the number of people gathered is only about 20,000. More importantly, a can of ketchup does not correspond to one person, but a family. Even if we deduct the cases of some rich people repeating purchases, the purchase rate of ketchup this time will not be less than 15%. From this, we can imagine how big the market for ketchup will be in the whole of Europe. Of course, the adjective cannot be ignored, a market that cannot be monopolized. The cost of a can of ketchup is 0.8 pence, and the net profit is 1.2 pence at this moment. Zeon-woo's little brain, which can be ranked in the top few in history, is very mercenary and calculates basic mathematics. 1,400 x 1.2 is 1,680, divided by 252 is 6.67 guineas, and our 30% share is 2.2 god. It's only 3 hours, it's only Grantham. How long will a can of ketchup last for a family? At this point, Zeon-woo patted Soo-yoon's shoulder heavily. Fat fish, I now declare that we are friends. Zeon-woo's palm was a little strong, and Soo-yoon was caught off guard and almost staggered. Can you be gentler? Soo-yoon muttered to himself, rubbing his shoulders. Just as he was about to raise his head to say something, he felt a pause around him, and a long-lost reminder board suddenly appeared in front of him. Newton has regarded the wall-facer as a drinking and eating friend. The novice mission has been completed, the dungeon time has stopped, and you will return to reality soon. Soo-yoon. Chapter 41 Deducing the Timeline. At the stall. With the appearance of the reminder board, Soo-yoon suddenly found that everything around him suddenly stopped. For example, at a stall 7 or 8 meters away from him, a vendor was arguing with a customer, and it seemed that a fight was about to break out, but the expressions of the two suddenly froze, and they looked like two lifelike inflatable dolls. For another example, the owner of a fruit stall not far away was sitting with his legs crossed, throwing an apple in one hand, and the apple suddenly stopped in the air. Newton probably saw the coffin lid. Oh, wait, Newton was also there. Soo-yoon turned around and found that the calf was grinning with a flying face, and even the lentil silk on his back teeth could be seen clearly. Motionless, as if frozen. Grantham, no, or the entire 1665 time and space. Just stopped without any signs. The whole world, only Soo-yoon's life kept -1s. Then, a halo quietly appeared under his feet, slowly enveloping him. Soo-yoon was quite familiar with this halo, obviously. As the prompt said, his novice mission had been completed, and he was about to return to reality. At the last moment of disappearance, the thought that floated through Soo-yoon's mind was, "Goddamn, a drinking buddy. So I spent a lot of effort to help you solve a bunch of academic problems, but it's not worth a few guineas, right? Master knew, you are worthy of it." Then there was another dizziness like when he came here, and when Soo-yoon came to his senses, he had returned to the claustrophobic space again. At this moment, the 3 doors were still floating in front of him, but the door on the far left, representing the time and space of 1665, was dark gray, and the original 100/100 on it also became 0/100. This scene was not uncommon for Soo-yoon in the past 10 years. This meant that if he wanted to open that door again, he would at least need to meet the requirement of returning the knowledge points to 100. As for whether this knowledge point is only related to degree or knowledge reserve, this needs to be studied separately. However, in addition to the entire door turning gray, Soo-yoon also noticed that there was a small dark golden box on the ground in front of the closed door. Soo-yoon thought for a few seconds, stepped forward decisively, and picked up the box. Although this space looks very powerful, if it really wanted to do something to him, it could have turned him into a corpse or away 10 years ago. As soon as the box was in his hand, it suddenly turned into another fluorescent screen. After testing, the novice mission of Wallfacer has been completed. Do you want to evaluate it? Be warning, because the current copy selected by Wallfacer is a multi-node mode, the result of this deduction is only for scoring. The time in the copy has been locked. The next time Wallfacer enters, it will automatically continue to the screen when it returns. Do you want to continue? There are 2 options below. Yes, oh Halbert handle K, Soo-yoon, so this thing is indeed problematic, right? But then again, the dialog box is a bit slutty, but it reveals a lot of information. According to the content of the dialog box, Halo will conduct a sandbox-like deduction based on Soo-yoon's previous behavior, and then make some kind of score and judgment. The time in Xiaonyu's space-time gate is locked, which means that the next time Soo-yoon enters it again, he will still see Xiaonyu's back teeth. Then he sighed with some melancholy and clicked the yes on the left. Soon, the dialog box began to change. The evaluation system is activated. The authority verification has passed the timeline deduction and begins. Theoretical line deduction. Wallfacer met the main character Newton in the copy 1665, and revealed the relevant theories in the rules as follows. 1. Dispersion phenomenon of light. 2. Refraction angle product, Yang-Wei triangle. 3. Taylor expansion, part. 4. Infinitesimal series approach. 5. St. Venant's theorem, part. 6. Stress balance theory, concept. Character lines are summarized as follows. 1. Isaac Newton. 2. William Askew and his family. 3. Robert Hooke. 4. Isaac Barrow. 5. Arling Duluth. 6. Tiffany Bowley. 7. Several passers-by, dream butterflies being deduced, results generated, academic achievements, affected by the authority of the Wallfacer. The current number of available academic weighted summaries is 4, and the weighted items are arranged in ascending order of time. Due to the intervention of the Wallfacer, Isaac Newton proposed the dispersion equation of light at the end of December 1665, and formally proposed the concept of infinitesimal series in March 1666, and proposed Newton's binomial theorem. He also combined binomials, m dimensions, with circular logarithms and proposed a discrete algebraic equation model of 1x2 equals 1x2, 1/2, 1x2, 1/2 equals xx2 x3, xn 1 Greek letter eta 2 equals 2 Greek letter eta 3. Mathematical formula weight. 9. In April 1666, Isaac Newton derived the third-order Henle expansion, which consolidated the model of self-flexion for the first time. Combining Kepler's third law, he successfully derived the law of universal gravitation. The Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy, originally scheduled to be published in 1687, was published in 1679. Core theory weighting. 17. In terms of elastic force, Newton proposed in 1674 that after a solid material is subjected to force, the stress and strain in the material are in a linear relationship, expressed as F equals K, X, known as Newton's law of mechanics. Later generations further derived the triple expression of the generalized Newton's law of mechanics, and the content involved in the National College entrance examination increased to 31 points. Mechanical change weighting. 13. Influenced by the integration of refraction angles proposed by the wall-facer, Newton was more determined than in history to believe in the particle nature of light. The integration-derived equation perfectly explained most of the optical problems at the time, and he had an absolute upper hand in the debate with Huygens, weighting of the coefficient of the status of the particle theory school in history. 6. Academic weighting. 9 plus 17 plus 13 plus 6 equals 45. Modern influence. No permission is available yet. Changes in related characters, in ascending order. Reuben Holland, husband of Tiffany Boley, former chief tailor of Bowles Clothing in Grantham. After tasting ketchup in early December 1665, he foresaw the demand for edible tomatoes with great foresight. In early 1666, he mortgaged his property and founded a tomato plantation, which later became the largest fruit supplier in Lincolnshire and its surrounding areas. Arling Dillard, pastor of St. Titus Church in Grantham, the 7th secretary of the Lincolnshire parish. Because the promotion of ketchup brought huge benefits to the parish, he was promoted to acting general secretary of the Nottingham Diocese in July 1666. In the drafting of the Bill of Rights, he proposed a motion to strengthen civil rights laws, and was later honored as St. Dillard. Leilani Aske, William Aske's youngest daughter, she became withdrawn after the wall-facer disappeared unexpectedly. She dropped out of school at the age of 15 and went out to work. At the age of 19, she went to Leiden University in the Netherlands to look for the wall-facer, but unfortunately died in a shipwreck. To be continued. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 42 Novus Mission Rewards. In a confined space. Looking at the latest deduction results about Leilani, Soo-yoon's face suddenly changed slightly. Although he had noticed that the naughty child had a certain difference in her attitude towards him, he did not expect that she would be affected so deeply by him in the future. To be honest, when Soo-yoon met Leilani, the naughty child was only 5 years old. So Leilani's feelings for Soo-yoon were obviously not in the sense of love in the sense of an adult. At that time, William and his wife were always worried about the loss of goods. The sisters Elila and Andrea formed a small circle exclusively for twins, and the eldest sister Lisa was obsessed with playing with a calf. Therefore, Leilani's social circle was actually very closed, and no one understood or even cared about her. This was also a major factor in her becoming a naughty child. To put it bluntly, she hoped to be recognized through rebellion. In this context, Soo-yoon's punishment for Leilani was so different that it left an indelible mark in Leilani's young heart. At the same time, in the virtual history of the deduction, Soo-yoon's disappearance was without any signs, perhaps after a period of crowding, or perhaps when waking up, Soo-yoon suddenly disappeared. This situation was another huge psychological shock to Leilani. Therefore, many factors combined together, causing Soo-yoon to become an obsession that Leilani could not erase. If you want to say how much Leilani likes or even loves Soo-yoon, this is obviously impossible unless that naughty child is also a reborn. Otherwise a 5-year-old girl cannot understand what love is. Her actions are more to give an answer to childhood and give herself a relief. Just like many fishermen hope to catch big fish, not for eating, but to fill the gap in their hearts. But unfortunately, this girl is not lucky and died on the voyage. But fortunately, this is just a deduction of the score, not an established reality. Leilani in the time and space when Soo-yoon returned is still a little girl with a knot in her heart. Then Soo-yoon let out a long breath and continued to watch. Elora and Andrea, the twin daughters of William Askew. In the original history, they married in 1671. Due to poor family conditions and malnutrition, they died at the age of 38 and 41 respectively. Now, due to the intervention of the wall-facer, the nutrition of the two daughters gradually supplemented before adulthood, and they married normally and had children. They died at the age of 66 in the same year. William and his wife, Akes are Newton's uncle and aunt. Due to the intervention of the wall-facer, William's family not only paid off their debts, but also became the largest ketchup distributor in Lincolnshire. Later, due to the desire for political status, William entered politics in early 1686 and was knighted by James II in October 1688. A month later, the Glorious Revolution was coming to an end. James II fled to France. William's title of knight was revoked by the new king. After paying a large fine, he was released. Frustrated, William returned to Woolsthorpe and found that his ancestors had a trace of African blood when he checked the family tree. Soo-yoon, well, this guy is also a typical unlucky guy. He lost a lot of money in business before. Then his eyes dropped again, and his expression gradually became solemn. According to the prompt of the dialog box, the order of character results is ascending. That is to say, the remaining characters are more affected by themselves directly or indirectly. Isaac Barrow, Isaac Newton's teacher, Professor Lucas of Trinity College, Cambridge University, resigned from his position because of Hooke in the original history, devoted himself to studying theology, and died at the age of 47. In the 1665 copy, influenced by the wall-facer, Barrow continued his research on mathematical theory. In 1668, Barrow and Newton jointly published the article Formula Lectures, which proposed differentials, finding the length of curves, variable substitution in definite integrals, and even the prototype of differential theorem of implicit functions. In 1673, Barrow became the vice-chancellor of Cambridge University, and officially became the president in 1680, starting the reform within the school. In 1683, Barrow improved the solution of higher-order equations and proposed the direction of the transition from geometric methods to analytical methods, which prompted the relevant theories of Euler, Lagrange, Laplace and others to be advanced by several years to more than 10 years. In 1685, Barrow proposed the theory of series, which made a major breakthrough in the concept of function, and wrote the famous mathematical article number theory. In later generations, Barrow was called Newton's strongest arm, the giant who lifted the giant, etc. In the mathematical world, Barrow's status is equivalent to Fourier in the history of the wall-facer, and he is one of the great founders of mathematics. Special weighting. 6. After reading Barrow's deduction results, Soo-yoon couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Although he had never seen Barrow in the past period of time, and didn't even know whether he was tall, short, fat or thin. But from the perspective of a later mathematical researcher, he would naturally prefer to see such a figure not buried by history. In the long history of human civilization, there are countless geniuses like Barrow who are brilliant but died early. Among these people, Barrow was lucky enough to leave manuscripts behind, and his achievements would be known and admired by future generations. However, the fate of some people was even more miserable than Barrow's. They could not even make a splash and died silently. It is possible that in a war or a famine, a genius who could have been on par with Newton and Einstein died early. No one can predict such a thing. Therefore, from the perspective of a scientific researcher, Soo-yoon was really happy for Barrow from the bottom of his heart. It's a pity that Barrow in local history cannot be changed, otherwise there should be no pressure to speed up modern mathematics by 20 to 30 years. As for how much the difficulty of high school and university mathematics will increase, Soo-yoon can't care. Anyway, he has graduated from university, and the courses of his younger brothers and sisters are of course the harder the better. What does it have to do with me if the younger generation fails the course? Then Soo-yoon adjusted his mood and looked at the last name. Robert Hooke. Robert Hooke, the original history of the originator and founder of many physical theories, the discoverer and namer of cells. Influenced by the wall-facer, Robert Hooke failed in his challenge to Barrow in 1665, and devoted a lot of energy to the derivation and analysis of the linear strain of the medium occupying the space, but due to the lack of mathematical tools, he could not make a breakthrough for several years. In April 1672, Hooke proposed the concept that light waves are transverse waves, but was strongly slapped in the face by Newton's dispersion equation a month later. In March 1674, Hooke proposed the theory of planetary motion, but before the letter was sent, Newton published the square ratio formula of elliptical orbits. In August of this same year, Newton proposed Hooke's law, which was originally proposed in 1678, as Newton's law of mechanics, and it was the talk of the town. Hooke, who found that the road ahead was dead, shifted his energy to the field of optical instruments, but 2 weeks before the relevance theory was about to break through, he saw the formula for the product of refraction angles published by Newton. In 1675, Hooke developed a balance spring. Although Newton did not release the progress of scientific research at the same time, Ira Bryce gave birth to Barrow's third child on the day when Hooke's paper was published. In 1682, Hooke became depressed and died 21 years early. However, because Hooke in this world line was unilaterally beaten by Newton for a long time, the portrait of Hooke after his death was fortunately preserved and not destroyed. People in later generations called Hooke the great biologist, founder of optical instruments, nicknamed British Joe, Great British Experience Baby, etc. Soon, then he moved his eyes down and landed on the last part of the dialog box, the world line is deduced. The next opening time of the 1665 copy will be based on the progress of Wallfacer, current copy lock time. 1665-118. I checked the calendar of 1665. The first is the first Sunday, and the market on the second Sunday is the 8th. Newbie task, I heard that you have a lot of things that you can let go? Be a little more cool. Task difficulty, task requirements, become friends with young Isaac Newton in any sense, and do not easily involve any historical events that you have not participated in. Task completion, expected completion, weighted score. 51/4 task evaluation, you turn the task of giving your gold-rimmed glasses to Newton into changing the timeline. I'm afraid you have some misunderstanding about the 4 words novice task. There is no hope. Wait for death. Goodbye, the reward has been determined in the task settlement. After a while, 3 reward items appeared in front of Suyun, which looked like a card, a golden egg and a piece of cropped paper. Suyun subconsciously reached out and touched them, and they floated towards him on their own initiative. At the same time, relevant information was put into Suyun's mind. Newton 30-minute thinking experience card X1, activated, and you can briefly have the speed of a 22-year-old peak Neo Z, and have a brain battle with Yan Ruyu, realistic mysterious Easter egg, X1, Lululu, 5th generation imidacloprid formula, X1, this is a good thing, but it is not so easy to really master it. Chapter 43, the 4th generation that must break through. In a claustrophobic space. Looking at the 3 phantoms of the items in front of him, Suyun's expression was a little subtle. Let's not talk about the Easter eggs for now. It is not difficult to see from the description that this should be something that needs to be combined with some real-life situations to be triggered. Now there is no clue to judge. Even in Suyun's opinion, considering that he had hit 5 times with 0 crit with a barbarian with an 80% crit rate not long ago, it is not certain whether he will have the opportunity to activate the Easter eggs in this life. Those who understand the pain of non-Africans understand. After temporarily putting the Easter eggs aside, there are only 2 things left. The first is the thinking experience card of the Mavericks. What can I say about this thing? There is no doubt that it is a good thing. As the founder of modern physics, the intelligence of the Mavericks is undoubtedly a peak in human history. It is definitely in the top 10 to be conservative. Especially the 22-year-old Mavericks, that is, in 1665, I am afraid that no one in history can compete with him. Therefore, the quality of this thinking card is beyond doubt. The only thing to worry about is its usage time. Half an hour is enough for Drungjet to fight 15 times. However, in terms of problem solving, half an hour can do more than a few things, but it is not enough either. Especially when facing some difficult problems, 2 or 3 hours is often the norm. Even in some math forums, it is considered a basic operation to spend 4 or 5 hours to solve a problem. Therefore, once this thinking card is used, it must be used on the blade, and timing is the most critical. Then Suyun moved his eyes to the cropped paper, which is the reward for recording the so-called 5th generation imidacloprid formula. Considering that there is no table and pen in the space, it is not suitable for research and calculation. Therefore, Suyun thought about it and silently said return in his heart. Swish, the space disappeared in an instant, and his consciousness returned to his hut. After coming to his senses, Soo-yoon did not rush to summon the imidacloprid formula, but lowered his head and looked at his feet first. At this moment, his feet were bare and he was not wearing shoes or socks. That's right. Neither the original pair of Vanta shoes nor the brogues that Xiaoniu gave him returned with him. Seeing this, Soo-yoon touched his chin, that is to say, the things on my body that meet the requirements will be brought to the dungeon with me, but the things in the dungeon cannot be brought back. Then he thought of something and looked at his ankle again. When he went to William's house for the first time, Xiaoniu took him to chop firewood. At that time, Soo-yoon's left ankle joint had a red swelling caused by compression, and it did not subside in the following days, but formed a broken skin. But at this moment, the skin of Soo-yoon's left ankle was smooth, and there was no trace of compression. In addition, in the past 2 weeks, due to the problem of living standards in the 17th century, Soo-yoon's body was more or less stained with some strange smell, and his clothes were not very clean. But at this moment, these smells had long disappeared. Soo-yoon looked at the alarm clock on the table again. It was 4:27 in the afternoon, exactly the same as when he entered the space. That is to say, my soul traveled to the 17th century. But the things I brought with me when I traveled will be selectively manifested in the dungeon, for example, glasses, clothes, shoes, which are modern in style but the technology already existed in that period, will travel with me, while mobile phones and headphones will be automatically blocked. Soo-yoon touched his chin thoughtfully. With such a comparison, the mapping relationship between the dungeon and reality became much clearer. It's a pity that I didn't think enough before and didn't try to get a haircut at Xiaoniu's house to see if my hairstyle would change after returning. Then he came to the desk, stretched out his hand, and focused his attention to sense it. Whoosh! The next second, a piece of craft paper gently fell into his hand. There were a bunch of dense chemical symbols and Chinese characters written on the craft paper, and some of the chemical structures made people feel dizzy at a glance. However, as a doctor of biology who was about to get his degree, Soo-yoon easily saw part of the chemical structure at the beginning. C9H10CLN502, also known as 1,6-chloropyridine-3-ilmethyl, N-nitroimidazolidine-2-ilamine, scientific name. Imidacloprid. It is an intramethylene systemic insecticide, belonging to the chlorinated nicotinilyl insecticide, also known as neonicotinoid insecticide, formerly proposed at the Brighton Crop Protection Conference in the UK in 1991. It is the actor of nicotinic acetylcholine receptors, interfering with the motor nervous system of pests to make chemical signal transmission fail, and is mainly used to control piercing sucking mouthparts pests and their resistant strains. In agriculture, it is mainly used to control aphids and planthopers, and its greatest use in life is to kill various furniture pests. Since it was launched in 1991, it has been rapidly promoted and has spread to more than 40 countries around the world in just 3 years. Today, it can be said that where there is a plant protection department, there is imidacloprid. At present, imidacloprid has become the world's #1 insecticide, and its global sales in 2014 have reached $1.14 billion. However, such a product that has ascended to the altar has not had a good time in recent years. First of all, there is the problem of pest resistance caused by long-term use. With the widespread use of imidacloprid, a large number of greenhouse pests have developed resistance to imidacloprid. Just like antibiotics, it is an inevitable result of widespread use. Secondly, because the target of imidacloprid is nacre, it has a defect that it will be seriously ineffective after multiple rounds of transmission, resulting in diminishing effects. Therefore, the effect of imidacloprid is getting smaller and smaller, like a cortisone gradually aging and finally becoming a procurus. Among nicotine insecticides, imidacloprid is considered a first-generation nicotine insecticide, thiamethoxam is a second-generation nicotine insecticide, and dimethomorph is a third-generation. However, in the field of imidacloprid, the current imidacloprid is an optimized product of the third generation. That's right, it's just the third generation. The imidacloprid rewarded by the Novus task is known as the fifth generation, which means that there is a whole generation of technical barriers between it and the existing imidacloprid. There is a rule in drug research and development, that is, there must be a progressive nature between generations. And it is impossible to make a leap across generations. Just like the virtual button smartphones between keypad phones and foldable screen phones, without a relay product, the gap between generations is almost impossible to cross. In other words, If Su Yoon wants to turn the 5th generation of imidacloprid into a new product that can be put into production, he must break through the 4th generation of the technical barrier. Then Su Yoon spread the craft paper further, hoping to see if he could get some inspiration. 0000000000010 1936 4.2021 0.0000 N 030000000011.3603.1516 0.0000000000000010.5205.7378 0.00000006 0.00000008.2153 2.2238 0.0000 C7000000000000000010 1936 4.2021 0.00000000000006.6453 2.2238 0.0000 C0.00000000000000. At the same time, a large column of information flashed through his mind. After about 2 minutes, Su Yoon slapped his forehead. Oh my god, it's this thing. Chapter 44 Tianliangwei. As a member of the Huaxia C9 Alliance, USTC is in the absolute first echelon of education and scientific research in China, and naturally there are no shortage of various cutting-edge laboratories and scientific research talents. For example, cold atomic physics, the quantum communication laboratory led by Pan Shui, the most handsome guy in USTC, and biomedicine. USTC Central District, Medical Center Building. Although USTC moved the School of Life Sciences to the West District a few years ago, various related equipment even made the accelerator in the West District move a little. But if we talk about R&D Foundation, the medical center in the Central District is still stronger than the West District. The medical center building is next to building number 8. There is an old Sichuan restaurant next to building number 8. The Maoksuwang there is simply a specialty of USTC, and the price is very affordable, and the business is quite hot. Behind it is the Shumu Hotel, where there are a bunch of young couples every weekend. Ahem, I've said too much? The medical center of HKUST is a single building research module with an orange-brown exterior. It is rumored that there are always a bunch of Viet Cong-like security personnel hiding around it. It is possible that a tree or a trash can is a real person cosplay, but unfortunately, no one seems to have ever seen it. After entering the gate, Su Yoon took the initiative to walk to the reception desk. Hello, access code USTC. Today is the weekend, and the girl on duty at the reception desk is a junior from the work part-time department. She is not tall but looks very sweet. She wears a pair of glasses and looks like a very quiet and shy girl. She skillfully clacked on the keyboard for a few times, and then performed a facial recognition on Su Yoon. The identity has been approved. Senior, please briefly mention the purpose of the visit. I need to make a report here. The Immunology Research Laboratory on the 4th floor. I have something to do with Dean Dawn. Oh mail, ahem, okay, senior, you can go up. Thank you. After reporting the relevant information, Su Yoon walked to the elevator entrance and pressed 4. The elevator slowly rose and soon stopped on the 4th floor. After leaving the elevator, Su Yoon walked about 10 meters to the left, came to an office, and raised his hand. Dong, dong, dong. In less than a moment, a male voice came from inside. Come in. Su Yoon pushed the door open and entered. This is not a very large office, with an area of only about 20 square meters. There is a desk opposite the entrance, and a row of bookshelves on the side. On the left-hand side of the entrance is an L-shaped small sofa and a set of coffee tables, forming a small reception area. Sitting on the desk at this time is a little old man who looks to be in his 50s, with a round face and short hair, and looks very kind. This person is the Dean of the School of Life Sciences of USTC, Academician Tianliangwei, one of the 100 Talents program, and also Su Yoon's doctoral supervisor. Pan Shui in physics and Bian Nanshan in biology. This is the perfect mentor configuration that Su Yoon spent a lot of effort to study for a degree. It is really not easy to find a mentor who is capable, willing to support the younger generation, and not greedy for credit. Of course, the relationship between mentors and students is often two-way. Students crave a good mentor, and mentors also hope to receive good students. Su-yoon was obviously the latter who met the requirements. Therefore, when he saw Su-yoon enter, Tianliangwei's kind round face softened even more. Zio-su, why don't you focus on your doctoral defense? Are you planning to ask me who the external reviewers are and try to get in through the back door? Students who have participated in doctoral graduation defenses should know that there are usually 5 to 6 reviewers for doctoral defenses, at least 2 of whom are experts from external units, which is also a difficult hurdle for the defense. Therefore, many doctoral students will learn about the identities of the reviewers before the defense, so as to prepare a defense plan with a certain tendency. This is more common abroad. However, Tianliangwei's words were obviously just a joke. With Su-yoon's ability, there was no need to use such tricks for the doctoral defense. Su-yoon walked to the desk and poured a glass of water for Tianliangwei and himself very familiarly, and drank it all in one gulp. Teacher, you are joking. Can't I, a student, care about your health and give up my weekend bedtime to come and see you? Hearing this, Tianliangwei raised his hands exaggeratedly, raised them to his forehead and shook them like he was worshipping a god. Oh my, please, God Su has spoken. How can a mortal like me not believe it? Then he pointed his chin towards the window and put on the attitude of a man who had experienced it. Also, I have a suggestion for you. Next time before you come to my house, you can go to the fruit store downstairs and buy a box of cut pitaya for 4 yuan. Maybe you will be more convincing when you say this. By the way, I want white pitaya. Red pitaya is heresy. Su-yoon didn't even think about it and blurted out, can it be reimbursed as experimental funds? If possible, I will buy 2 more boxes next time. Tianliangwei, then he coughed lightly, stopped joking with Su-yoon, and asked, okay, let's get down to business. Why did you come to me today? Seeing that Tianliangwei was gradually getting serious, Su-yoon also became serious and brought up the business. Teacher, when I was writing my paper yesterday, I suddenly thought of something. I spent a whole night doing simple calculations and deductions, and I felt that it seemed feasible, so I came to you for help today. Huh? What's the matter? Do you know about imidacloprid? Imidacloprid? Tianliangwei nodded. Although his main research direction is immunity and chronic diseases, he is one of the academicians of the Chinese Academy of Engineering. Naturally, he is not unfamiliar with imidacloprid, a neurotropic insecticide that has been around for more than 30 years. It's the first generation of nicotinoid insecticides, and now it has been optimized to the 3rd generation. In recent years, its broad-spectrum nature has gradually weakened, and it has even fallen behind. What, do you have any ideas? Su-yoon did not answer his question directly, but continued to ask, Teacher, do you think there is still research prospect for imidacloprid? It's hard to say. Most institutions at home and abroad are tinkering with this thing, but the progress is very slow. Tianliangwei shook his head and pointed his index finger at the floor. For example, our creative lab on the 3rd floor has been studying this kind of problem, but there is almost no news at present. Unless imidacloprid can be optimized to the 4th generation, the current market will only get smaller and smaller. At this point, Tianliangwei, who knew Su-yoon well, vaguely sensed something and asked, Zio-su, do you have any ideas about the new direction of imidacloprid? Su-yoon nodded and took out a piece of paper he had copied and summarized from his body. It's a bit of a superficial idea. Teacher, please take a look at this. Tianliangwei took the paper, flattened it and shook it lightly, picked up a pair of reading glasses from the table with his right hand, and read it carefully. After a while, his pupils shrank slightly, and he suddenly raised his head and looked at Su-yoon. Pheromone. Chapter 45. Let's eliminate cockroaches and make them protected animals. Pheromone. In the office. Looking at Tianliangwei, who looked surprised, Su-yoon nodded affirmatively. Yes, I think the entry point of the 4th generation of imidacloprid is pheromone. Tianliangwei gently pushed his glasses, his expression a little solemn and confused. Tell me in detail. Zio-su, don't tell me that the method you mentioned is to simply mix pheromones and imidacloprid in ingredients. I can buy you 20 pieces of clothes moth pheromone sticky plates for 10 yuan on Taobao. Pheromones, also known as external hormones, refers to substances secreted by an individual outside the body, which are detected by other individuals of the same species through the olfactory organs, causing the latter to show certain behavioral, emotional, psychological or physiological changes. For example, adult humans will emit pheromones, and there is even a perfume called pheromone for sale. At present, There is still controversy in the scientific community about the specific composition of human pheromones, but the substances with higher acceptance are androstenone for men and ester-ditrenal for women. The most abundant places for pheromones are the armpits and crotch. You can smell the smell of these two places and see if it is different from the smell of other parts of the body. When Soo-yoon was in high school, a friend always said that there was a girl in the class who smelled good. Curious, Soo-yoon tried to breathe in while lining up for the break. Wow, a faint smell of body odor. This is the difference in pheromone feedback. People who like it very much, and people who don't like it hate it very much. So in a sense, your armpit smells good is actually a love word. In the field of insect pests, the scope of use of insect pheromones is very wide. The advantage of pheromones is that they have strong targeting, do not harm natural enemies, and have no risk of pesticide residues. The disadvantage is that they are also highly targeted, ineffective against other pests, and only effective against adults, not larvae. Therefore, pheromones currently have relatively high limitations and can be regarded as an auxiliary means. That is, use this thing to attract insects, and then trap them with sticky boards or boxes and other things before proceeding to the next step. A more advanced method is to mix pheromones and biological poisons together, stir them into a ball-like dough, and then attract the target to chew the poison. Facing Tian Liangwei's concerns, Soo-yoon first poured him a cup of tea, and then said, "Teacher, I understand what you mean. Don't worry, I'm not exploiting that kind of conceptual loophole." Then he took out a pen and paper from his body, and explained as he wrote, "My idea is, can we use some kind of synthesis technology to combine pheromones with imidacloprid to form a new and powerful poison? For example, it has both the attraction function of pheromones and the multi-generation transmission effect of imidacloprid? In other words, pheromones will spread as imidacloprid spreads." Looking at the few lines of words Soo-yoon wrote on the paper, Tian Liangwei vaguely understood, "Synthesize a new type of poison? I seem to understand what you mean. Ordinary mixed drugs attract targets through pheromones, let them swallow the poison and then spread it, but because they do not carry pheromones, the effect curve of multiple rounds of transmission is generally not ideal. And your idea, Zio-Su, is to make the poison also have the effect of pheromone. When the target leaves the bait, it becomes a new bait that emits pheromones, and it can even be passed on for multiple generations." Soo-yoon nodded and said affirmatively, "Yes, this is the direction of the fourth or even fifth generation of imidacloprid that I think it is." Tian Liangwei pursed his lips and thought carefully, his expression still not optimistic. "It seems feasible in theory, but there are many technical problems to be solved. First of all, the target is single. The pheromone of an insect can only be effective for the adult of this species. For example, the moth sticky board I mentioned earlier can only catch moths, and other flies and mosquitoes can't be caught at all. Second, it is necessary to break through the corresponding information barrier to synthesize it, which is too difficult, otherwise those well-known companies or laboratories would have done it long ago. As he said, almost all pheromone poisons are currently made by physical mixing. This production method cannot be said that the production companies are stupid, but because they cannot synthesize pheromones and biological poisons into a new substance. As an authority in the domestic biological hospital, Tian Liangwei naturally knows how difficult it is to synthesize pheromones and biological poisons. At present, companies such as Bayer, Pfizer, Roche, and Novartis are all conducting research in this direction. This kind of technological breakthrough will not cause much waves in the scientific community. Not to mention the Nobel Prize, even the Caliph Prize or the Lasker Award are out of reach, but the market behind it is not a small number. Of course, most of these laboratory combinations are not imidacloprid, but the third-generation dinitefuran. After all, in those cutting-edge laboratories, imidacloprid compared to dinitefuran is like Aoi compared to Mr. Mikami, and they do not belong to the same era. Looking at Tian Liangwei, who didn't know what bad memories he was thinking of, Soo-yoon seemed very calm. He saw him write another line on the paper, "Teacher, please take a look at this." Tian Liangwei subconsciously looked at the paper. After a while, he hesitated and said, "Is this methylated alkane?" Soo-yoon nodded and drew a horizontal line in the middle of one of the CH3, indicating that it would be erased. Tian Liangwei exclaimed, "Single chiral methyl." Soo-yoon continued to write a line of words, CH3, CH2, 2CH equals CH, CH equals CH, CH2, 8CH3, Ru, P-cymene, 2Cl2, 2, HCHO, ZNBR2, CH3 Kun, DCE, CH2Cl, CH2Cl, and a pyridine functional group. Teacher, do you think this reaction can succeed? Looking at the line of words written by Su Yun, Tianliang Wei was stunned at first, then took the pen and quickly calculated it on paper and in his mind. Remove a CH3CH bond cyclization. Directly cut the substrate carbon-hydrogen bond through transition metal catalysis? Directing group forms intermediate CM. It seems that it can really form selective hydroxymethylation with pyridine. It is well known. Hydroxymethylation functional groups are widely present in drugs and bioactive small molecules. They perform nucleophilic addition on aldehydes to obtain corresponding alcohols, ethers or esters. If you remove the CH3 in the upper right corner of the pheromone alkane, it can theoretically form a compound with pyridine under the catalysis of ruthenium. Of course, this is only a possibility in the derivation formula, and there is a high degree of uncertainty in the operation. Looking at the teacher whose expression was becoming increasingly solemn, Su Yun continued, as for the first point you mentioned, it is true that pheromones have a drawback. That is, the target of a pheromone is always only one kind of organism. Moths are moths, and fruit flies are fruit flies. They cannot communicate with each other. No one can change this. So why don't we just do a targeted screening? Targeted screening. Tianliang Wei raised his eyelids and looked at Su Yun and said, what does this mean? It means just researching one direction and ignoring the others. Su Yun spread his hands towards his teacher and smiled. The entire field of biological agents is so large that we don't need to and can't cover it all. In this case, why don't we choose a pest that is more harmful and develop a special insecticide for it? Admittedly, there are many pests in agriculture. If you kill wireworms, there are still tiger moths. If you kill tiger moths, there are still cotton bolls. If you don't eliminate them all, it will be difficult for agricultural products to completely get rid of pests and diseases. But in addition to agriculture, there are also many pests in our lives. Killing one of these pests is solving a big problem, and the cost effectiveness is much higher than that of agriculture. Once this new compound can be produced, some pests may be eliminated and turned into protected species. The next generation can only be seen in zoos, for example, cockroaches. Chapter 46, a crucial step. Cockroach refers to insects belonging to the order Blattaria, which belongs to the phylum Arthropoda, class Insecta, order Blattaria. This creature has survived on Earth for more than 350 million years, even longer than dinosaurs. But in the entire ecosystem, the existence of cockroaches is actually not very meaningful. Of course, it is not to say that it is useless. It has the nature of a decomposer in nature, which can accelerate the degradation of organic matter into inorganic matter. In addition, it also has certain value in medicine. For example, Yunanbei Iao's active peptide toothpaste contains cockroach extracts, and you may kiss cockroaches every day. But these contributions are nothing compared to the harm it brings. Cockroaches carry a variety of pathogens, such as Shigella dysenteriae, Salmonella paratyphoid A and B, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, Proteus, Ascaris, hookworms, etc., and are a major disease transmission medium, but they themselves are not sick. At the same time, due to the flat body of cockroaches, they are good at living in tiny crevices and can survive almost anywhere there is water and food. Therefore, they will also get into computers, copiers, electronic scales, water dispensers and various communication equipment and electronic instruments. Once they bite the circuit or components and cause a short circuit, it will lead to equipment failure, communication interruption and other unexpected accidents. Behind almost every plague in history, you can see the dancing wings of cockroaches. Therefore, it is not advisable to say that cockroaches are useless, but there is no doubt that their harm is greater than their contribution. Moreover, the decomposer attribute of cockroaches is not irreplaceable, at least in the city. For example, mealworms can perfectly replace the role of cockroaches in the decomposition factory, and the cost is even lower. As for cockroaches in nature, that is not within the scope of Su Yun's elimination. Su Yun made it very clear before that he intended to eliminate cockroaches in the living area, that is, German cockroaches, American cockroaches and Oriental cockroaches, which are common pests in cities. The reason why cockroaches cannot be eliminated is largely because female cockroaches only need to mate once in their lifetime to lay eggs for life. After the male and female cockroaches mate, a bean pod-shaped thing called an ootheca grows at the end of the female cockroach's tail, and the eggs are laid in it. A female cockroach can produce at least 10 and at most 90 oothecae, and in one ootheca, at least 10 and at most 50 small cockroaches can be hatched. This is one of the important reasons why cockroaches cannot be completely killed. If pheromones can be synthesized into a new type of poison with imidacloprid, it will undoubtedly be a huge help in eliminating cockroaches. Targeted elimination of cockroaches. In the office, Tian Liangwei's eyes were somewhat deep. He touched his chin and asked Su Yun, instead of conducting general research, you are specifically targeting a species. Xiao Su, are you planning to go into business? Tian Liangwei's tone was not questioning, but he tactfully brought some opinions. In this era, it is not something that cannot be put on the table for scientific researchers to start a company. On the contrary, whether at home or abroad, capable experts will almost always start their own companies or cooperate with institutions. Making money with knowledge is like licking your own teacher, not shabby. In China, the age of 65 is almost the dividing line. There are fewer top scholars over 65 who take care of the industry, and almost all experts under 65 will be involved in some business territory. For example, Tian Liangwei has a cooperative institution with the School of Medicine of Jilin University, which specializes in research on NK cells. Everything is legal and compliant, and there is no need to pay more than 10 billion in taxes. However, considering Su Yun's current age, Tian Liangwei is still not very confident that he will engage in industry at this time. In his opinion, Su Yun can first train in the scientific research module of USTC for a few years. When his experience, ability and social connections are more clear, he can consider starting a business. Anyway, as one of the top batches of universities in China, USTC still has very generous treatment in scientific research. There are many people who are worth millions of yuan by the age of 30 by relying on patents, and there is no such thing as wasting youth. Facing his teacher's rather tactful question, Su Yun hesitated for a few seconds, and finally said, I have this plan, but it is definitely not now. The fourth generation of imidacloprid has not been developed yet. How can I start a company without technology? Besides, even if I want to start a business at that time, I will definitely ask for help from our school, because we are from the University of Science and Technology of China. Su Yun's last words were a compliment, but also part of his true feelings. After all, with the support of the University of Science and Technology of China, whether it is entrepreneurial support or personal connections, it is not comparable to what he can do without a job. Although the University of Science and Technology of China ranks behind Tsinghua University, Peking University, Jiaotong University and Fudan University, in terms of foothold, the University of Science and Technology of China, the University of Science and Technology of China and Harbin Institute of Technology are the three giants in China. Okay, I respect your idea. Seeing that Su Yun's words revealed some attitude, Tian Liangwei no longer insisted and turned the topic back to the present. Tell me, Xiao Su, what are you going to do now? Su Yun took out a neatly folded paper from his body and handed it to Tian Liangwei. Teacher, I want to apply for a medicinal chemistry laboratory. This is the list of instruments. Tian Liangwei took the paper and looked at it while talking to himself. Conductivity meter. Gradient liquid chromatograph. Drug dissolution instrument. Fully automatic refractometer. Electric pulse remelting and resolidification device and ICP, MS700. Tian Liangwei put down the list and tapped lightly on the table with his index finger. Xiao Su, the other instruments are fine, but the last two things are a bit troublesome. Electric pulse remelting and resolidification device, ICP, MS700. These are equipment in the National Major Scientific Research Instrument Development Project. The latter is cheaper, with a price of more than 7 million, but the former is close to 15 million. If the applicant was a doctoral supervisor or academician, there would be no problem with this kind of equipment. However, Su Yun was just a doctoral student, and he applied for an independent laboratory, so to be honest, this was a bit over the line. There's nothing I can do, teacher. Su Yun's face also showed a trace of bitterness, and he shook his head gently. The short-term precision of ICP, MS700 is much higher than that of OCPOS and GFAAS, and when it comes to the interference of methyl-based acids, the advantages of OCMAs are really too far ahead. How can we do without these two devices? Tian Liangwei glared at him unhappily. Yes, the equipment is easy to use, but why don't you say that the cost of starting up ICP, MS700 is 4 times that of the latter two? Let's not talk about the price and compare the quality of Bentley with Bide, right? Then he sighed softly, took out an application form that was stored separately from the drawer, and pushed it in front of Soo-yoon. Fill it out. Soo-yoon took the form and was about to write, when his eyes suddenly glanced at the lower right corner of the application form. Hey, teacher, something's wrong. What's wrong? Why is your private seal on this form? Tian Liangwei took a sip of wolfberry tea and rolled his eyes at Soo-yoon. How fresh. You are not qualified to apply for this level of equipment. I will give you the quota for the supplementary items of this year's 100 Talents program. Don't worry, the procedures are in compliance with regulations. Also, I tell you, be careful when using the equipment. If you break it, you can sell yourself to pay the money. Okay, stop talking nonsense, don't dither, fill it out quickly, fill it out and get out. Looking at Yan Liangwei who seemed impatient, Soo-yoon was silent for a moment, took a deep breath, bent down and wrote the application. After more than 20 minutes, the application was completed. Tian Liangwei took the form, looked it up and down, and smacked his lips. Well, it looks pretty decent, but the equipment can be applied for according to the specifications of the doctoral supervisor, but you can forget about the same level of funding. In addition, you have to put together the R&D team for independent experiments by yourself. At most, we can reimburse you for food expenses, plus 1 or 2 team building expenses or something like that. The R&D team is no problem, I already have a candidate, Soo-yoon replied calmly, and then asked, Teacher, if the funding cannot be at the same level, how much will it be reduced to? Tian Liangwei thought for a while, and said, the research and development funds for biological agents are generally issued in stages. The first phase for the doctoral supervisor file is about 2 to 3 million. The follow-up depends on your results. Hundreds of millions at the Nobel Prize level is not impossible. As for you, I will try my best to get you 500,000 for instrument funds, about 300,000 for materials, 50,000 for miscellaneous items, and the department will give you another 50,000, a total of 900,000 in funds, including 400,000 for cash flow. That's about it. Soo-yoon nodded lightly, with a little excitement in his heart. 900,000 yuan was not a big number for Soo-yoon. In his previous life, he had participated in national projects worth 90 million yuan or even 900 million yuan. But this time, the 900,000 yuan was different from the past. It might open up a huge blank area and help Soo-yoon and countless others fulfill a lifelong obsession, killing cockroaches. Chapter 47, Calling People. After filling out the laboratory application report, Soo-yoon stopped bothering Yan Liangwei and found a reason to get up and leave the medical center. The approval and filing of the drug chemistry laboratory usually takes 7 to 15 working days, which is almost 2 weeks including weekends. However, with the intervention of Yan Liangwei, an academician-level boss, it is estimated that the dispatch can be completed in 3 to 4 days. As for the funds, they will be transferred to a card opened in the public account of the School of Life Sciences. When Soo-yoon withdraws, he needs to list the expenditure items and be reviewed regularly. If it is a normal doctoral supervisor, it will be much more relaxed. Some will even directly transfer the funds to a card called the project team, which is actually a private account, thus breeding a lot of dark sides. Okay, let's get back to the topic. What Soo-yoon needs to break through this time is the binding barrier of the 4th generation of imidacloprid, and the process is very complicated. Therefore, in addition to the experimental site, there is another indispensable core element that needs to be solved in the whole process, that is the researchers. It is true that Soo-yoon is a top student, but even the most talented people need helpers. In many cases, the two complement each other. For example, Mavericks has John Condit, Einstein has Shirley Wright, Dirac has Taraji Reddy, Melody has Jacqueline and the Convertible, etc. Although there is a mysterious aura, Soo-yoon will definitely need some strong helpers to assist him in the future, whether he wants to do scientific research or start a business. This is true in the long run, and it is also true now. It is too unrealistic to fight alone. As for the candidates for this experiment, Soo-yoon has a few target candidates. It is very simple to help. Just ask a few graduate students to help. The research on biological agents has always been a general direction, and many people who want to do related experiments have no chance. After the work is done, everyone will have a meal of 400 to 500 yuan per person. If there is a technological breakthrough, they will give a red envelope. I believe that many current students are willing to sign up. After all, Su-yoon's application for Liangwee's auxiliary project quota can also be regarded as a good project in his resume. If he meets a thick-skinned person, he may directly say that it is a national project on his resume. In addition to the toolman who helped him, Su-yoon also planned to find another strong partner. Thinking of this, Su-yoon couldn't help but stop, found a relatively quiet corner at random, and dialed a phone. Beep beep. After a moment, a male voice came from the other end of the phone. Hello? Old Sue. Yes, it's me. What's the matter? I'm accompanying my junior sister in the badminton hall. Old Hodagu, I'll treat you. Are you coming? Akak, wait for me for 15 minutes. See you at the entrance of the South District. After hanging up the phone, Su-yoon couldn't help shaking his head. This guy. Then he put the phone back into his pocket and turned around to walk towards the South District. After about 12 or 13 minutes, when Su-yoon came to the entrance of the South District, a strong shout suddenly came from behind him. Old Sue. Old Sue. Su-yoon looked over and saw a man with a shaved head waving at him not far away. The man was about 27 or 28 years old. The collar of his sportswear was slightly open, and the sleeves of his shirt were rolled up to the middle of his arms. He had short hair, a square face, and sharp eyebrows. He was a little handsome, but much worse than you, the reader. This man was Su-yoon's best friend, Chu Sheng, who was also a doctoral student in the School of Life Sciences. Hearing Chu Sheng's greeting, Su-yoon waved to him, walked quickly to his side, and glanced at his back with some curiosity. Old Chu, didn't you go to play badminton with your junior sister? How come there are no rackets or your junior sister? Chu Sheng trotted all the way, and sweat had already appeared on his forehead. He shook his collar and said, I asked my junior sister to send the racket back to the dormitory. By the way, Old Sue, you are not kidding, right? Are you really treating me? Su-yoon looked at this guy speechlessly, and sighed exhaustedly. Really? Let's go. Lao Hodagudu is one of the most famous snack bars around the University of Science and Technology. This is a Wei cuisine restaurant. The owner is very enthusiastic and the price is quite affordable. You can get it for 50 yuan per person. And when you check out, secretly show the HKUST card, and the owner will press 0.85 for you on the computer. Many HKUST people joke that Lao Hodagudu in the South District is almost single-handedly fighting against the entire snack street in the East Gate of the West District. The door of Lao Hodagudu is at the intersection of Tongchang South Road and Shangpei Road. Su-yoon and his friend walked for about 10 minutes and arrived outside the store. Boss, a pot of bone soup, a pot of Neptune vermicelli and a beef stew, and a pickled cucumber. After entering the store, Su-yoon reported a few dishes very familiarly, and then strolled to the beverage cabinet to get 4 cans of Budweiser. He returned to his seat and snapped off the lid. No Huquan, let's make do with Budweiser. Su-yoon and Chu Sheng are both from Fujian province. They have liked drinking Huquan beer since they were young. However, after coming to Luzhou to study, they have fewer opportunities to see hometown beer. Most of the time, it is either Snow King or Budweiser. This kind of restaurant that specializes in campus gatherings serves food very quickly. Within a few minutes, all the dishes Su-yoon ordered were served. After the dishes were served, Chu Sheng first took a soup spoon and put it into the heating pot to stir it, then picked up a small piece of cucumber and crunched it, and asked, Old Sue, tell me, what's the matter? Su-yoon smiled and glanced at him, and joked, what for? Can't I win the lottery and get rich to treat you to a good meal? Chu Sheng snorted and said disdainfully, just your African face? 3 numbers can be seen as dark as the moon. No one will believe that you can win the lottery. Okay, tell me what's the matter, otherwise I won't be able to eat comfortably. Seeing this, Su-yoon stopped joking, coughed tactically, and described the matter between himself and Bian Liangwei in detail. That's about it. The teacher has submitted the application form, and the research group will be established in about 3 days. Chu Sheng held a bone marrow in one hand and huffed and puffed the marrow. After listening, he looked at him in surprise. You are so good, kid. How did you think of stuffing transition metals in? Pheromones contain alkenes. If it is really possible to cyclize the CH3 in a targeted manner, wow, there is something to be done. Su-yoon took a sip from a can of Budweiser and said, how about it? Are you willing to help me? You are more familiar with the directing group assistants than me. If it really works, I will give you a second author on the paper. The second author, as the name suggests, is the second author. In addition to the first author and the corresponding author, The second author is the third most important role in a paper. Qiu Sheng is a close friend of Su Yun since high school. He is also a genius who entered the junior class on the first try. In the few memories of Su Yun's previous life, Qiu Sheng helped him a lot when he was at his lowest point. He was able to successfully transform into the tea industry later, thanks to the connections introduced by Qiu Sheng and the funds lent. Su Yun will be responsible for the main research tasks in this project. The first author must and can only be signed by himself, and the corresponding author must be Yan Liangwei, so Qiu Sheng naturally has only the second author to choose. Qiu Sheng didn't care much about this. He said without hesitation, "Okay, but you have to give me 2 more days. I have a project that is still being completed. I will go to the laboratory next week and try to finish it before Thursday." Su Yun nodded and agreed happily, "No problem, I'm not in a hurry about this matter. I can still wait for a few days." Qiu Sheng took another bite of the meat bone and laughed, "Tisk tisk, if the 4th generation imidacloprid can be developed, it may be published in PLOS ONE once, but the page fee of this thing is not cheap. $1,400, and it is not possible to apply for page reduction in China. I say you should ask Director Yan in the end whether the college can reimburse this part of the money." Looking at Qiu Sheng, who was talking freely, Su Yun, who was sitting opposite him, couldn't help but shake his head slightly in his heart. Old Qiu, you are wrong. How could my goal be a water-filled journal like PLOS ONE? After all, what I want to study this time is not the 4th generation of imidacloprid, but the 5th generation. Chapter 48. The research team starts. 5 days later. A pharmaceutical chemistry laboratory on the 4th floor of the medical center building of HKUST. At this moment, Su Yun was standing on the operating table in a pure cotton lab coat, with 6 men and women of different heights standing in front of him. My fellow students, since everyone is here, I will briefly talk about the project for a while. Ahem, a few words. Su Yun raised a stack of bound documents in his hand, and his eyes quickly swept over the people in front of him. Yesterday morning, I got the project approval receipt. Now that the procedures, venues and personnel have been finalized, our project team has been established. Our project team does not have a supervisor to lead the team. I am the applicant and the first person in charge. The laboratory will be used for 2 weeks. The research records will be registered in your files. Regardless of whether there are any results, it can be regarded as a decent resume, which should be of some help to everyone in the future. Hearing this, 2 of the 6 people in front of him suddenly showed a hint of uncontrollable joy on their faces. As one of the members of C9, USTC has an annual R&D budget of over 10 billion yuan, which ranks about 9th or 10th in China. Although this number seems large, after deducting a series of projects such as the 973 program, the 863 program, the National Science and Technology Support Program, and the International Science and Technology Cooperation and Exchange Program, the funds and quotas distributed to each institute are far less than they seem. After being divided by some big names, there is still some money left, but there are not many high-quality project quotas left. Many graduate students have been busy for 1 or 2 semesters, but they may not be able to get involved in large-scale projects, and can only be used by their supervisors silently. Therefore, when Su Yun came to the door with the project proposal of Yan Liangwei's auxiliary project, several miserable graduate students immediately nodded, and the vibration frequency was like a massage stick, which made Su Yun say that Chinese people don't cheat Chinese people. To be frank, if you have participated in a project team of this level, no matter whether there will be any results in the end, you can ask for at least 500 yuan more per month when you apply for salary after graduation. Then Su Yun paused and continued, the goal of our project is very simple, which is to try to synthesize a new substance from pheromones and the 3rd generation imidacloprid, to verify and explore the direction of the 4th generation imidacloprid. The ultimate goal is, as soon as he finished speaking, several younger students shouted in unison, eliminate Xiaoqiang. After that, everyone laughed happily. Amid the laughter, a girl with short hair raised her hand and asked Su Yun with curiosity, Senior, why do you have such a strong grudge against cockroaches? Su Yun glanced at her lightly. The girl was called Tang Yichu, a senior student with good grades and good reputation. For me, it is a sad story, but what I said will make you very happy, so I refused to answer. After that, he raised the documents in his hand, and the pages rustled in the air. Okay, let's stop talking here. We have limited time. Everyone, Check the gas masks and organic vapor filter boxes, and put on protective skirts. The experiment will start in 15 minutes. Then he looked at Chu Sheng. Old Chu. Check the machine and the switch. I'll go distribute the materials. Chu Sheng nodded. Understood. 15 minutes later, everything was ready. The main experimental reagents used by Su Yun and others this time were 2-phenylpyridine, 4-hydroxymethylphenylboronic acid, 2-naphthalenoboronic acid, 3-furanboronic acid, 3-benzothiophenylboronic acid, N-phenylpyrazole, benzoquinoline, rubcimine, 2Cl2, 2, etc. In addition, there were more than 30 reagents including 2-bromopyridine, 2-bromo-4-chloropyridine, THF, DMF, N-dimethylformamide, DMSO, 1,4-dioxane, etc. I wrote the details in the writer's words. At the same time, the rest of the people also stood in their respective positions in turn. If you want to combine pheromones with imidacloprid, you must first cyclize CH3. I plan to complete it through the hydrogenation reduction reaction of the epoxy terminal alkyne and 1-bromo-2-pentyne coupling. On the operating table, Su Yun expressed his ideas while saying to Tula Man, Li Wei, this task is handed over to you. Understood. The Li Wei mentioned by Su Yun is a graduate student, 24 years old this year, with a short haircut, who immediately started the operation after hearing the words. At the same time, Su Yun looked at Tang Yikyu again. Xiao Tang, you are responsible for following up and trying to capture the optically active fragments of epoxysulfonate. Understood. As we all know, allyl alcohol will undergo a sharpless asymmetric epoxidation reaction under the catalysis of L+ disopropyl tartaric acid and tetraisopropyl titanium oxide to obtain 2S, 3R, -2, 3-epoxy 1-tetradecyl alcohol. Epoxy alcohol, 2S, 3R, -9 is subjected to p-dilunysulfonylation in ring opening with perchloric acid, and the absolute configuration of carbon atom number 3 is flipped from R to S, to obtain 2S, 3S, p-dilunysulfonic acid 2, 3-dihydroxy 1-tetradecyl alcohol ester. Then, after potassium carbonate ring closing and p-dilunysulfonylation, 2S, 3S, p-dilunysulfonic acid 1, 2-epoxy 3-tetradecyl alcohol ester can be obtained, and the yield can reach 89%. It is very simple and very easy to understand. A few minutes later, Tang Yikyu raised her hand again, but this time she didn't ask why Su Yun wanted to kill cockroaches. Senior, the epoxy sulfonate was captured. Very good. What is the EE value? It is still being measured. Epoxy alcohol and dinitrobenzoyl chloride are still reacting. Oh, it's out, 93%. Su Yun heard this and couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. The so-called EE value refers to the enantiomeric excess. The theoretical EE value of chiral epoxy sulfonate is 90%. The 93% measured by Xiao Tang is above the standard line. For now, it is considered a successful first step. After completing the synthesis of the key optically active intermediate, the next step is to study the asymmetric synthesis of the target pheromone. The operation of this step is to react the epoxy sulfonate with trimethylsilyl first, to open the epoxy ring, and then treat it with potassium carbonate to close the ring and remove TMS to obtain 4S, 5R, -4, 5-epoxy 1-hexadecine, and the yield of this step is 0.60%. That's right, 89% in the first step and 60% in the second step. The yield is almost halved. This is a very common situation in biochemistry. The yield is lower and lower, from 90% to 60%, and then 30%. After 7 or 8 rings, the yield of abnormal compounds may even be in the single digit. So why is scientific research expensive? In the first 10 minutes, Su Yun and his team spent at least 1,000 yuan, including the loss of the machine. The preparation of 5-epoxy 1-hexadecine went smoothly. Just when Su Yun and his team were about to take another step forward, another graduate student in charge of nucleophilic substitution suddenly said inside, Senior, the nucleophilic substitution reaction failed, all experimental reagents. 2-phenylpyridine, p-methylbenzenoboronic acid, p-vinylbenzenoboronic acid, 4-hydroxymethylbenzenoboronic acid, 4-vinylbenzenoboronic acid, 2-naphthalenoboronic acid, 3-furanboronic acid, 3-benzothiophenylboronic acid, N-phenylpyrazole, benzoquinoline, rubcimine, 2Cl2, 2, as well as paraformaldehyde, DCM, dichloromethane, DCE, CHCl3, chloroform, Mia, methanol, ETOH, ethanol, acode, ethyl acetate, THF, tetrahydrofuran, DMF, N-dimethylformamide, DMSO, dimethyl sulfoxide, 1,4-dioxane, 1,4-dioxane, CH3CN, acetonitrile, N-hexane, N-hexane, and toluene, toluene, etc. 2-bromopyridine, 2-bromo-4-chloropyridine, 2-bromo-3-methylpyridine, 2-bromo-5-methylpyridine, 2-bromo-3-fluoropyridine. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 49, Sudden Hot Search. In the laboratory. Hearing that there was a problem with the nucleophilic substitution link, Su-Yun did not frown, and asked calmly, Xiao Zhao, there are many possibilities for the substitution reaction to fail. What is the specific situation? Is it that the substance does not react? It does react. Xiao Zhao scratched his hair in confusion, his eyes flashing with confusion. Logically, the balanced formula should be fine, but there is no product generated, not even a crude product. How much pyridine? 3%. I understand. Wait a minute. Hearing this, Su-Yun immediately picked up a pen and paper and started calculating on the table, his expression calm. He was not pretending to be deep at this time, but he really thought that this matter was not a big deal. In his previous life, he had participated in many large-scale physics research projects, in which the cost of a few dozen seconds for some major projects was several million, including equipment loss, and a slight mistake might ruin all the previous efforts. Now the total funding for this project is less than 1 million, of which the first batch of cash flow is only 50,000 yuan. It would be strange if he could be nervous. After a moment, Su-Yun gently threw the pen and looked at Xiao Zhao. Qui 4%, add pyridine to 4%, 170 degrees. No, try reflux at 180 degrees for 3 hours. Su-Yun and others had made full light-proof preparations before the experiment, so they did not need to consider the possibility of decomposition of the raw material iodine. Therefore, no product was generated in the substitution reaction, and the problem was most likely in the ring. After dealing with Xiao Zhao's problem, Zhou Piao, another girl in the research group besides Tang Yiqiu, raised her hand again. Senior, there is also a problem with the epoxy ring opening. Don't worry, you also tell me in detail. In this way, Su-Yun basically dealt with the problems of team running in and compound balancing in the first half of the experiment of the entire research group. After all, except for Chiu Sheng, the other 5 tool people present were below the 3rd year of graduate school. For example, Xiao Zhao mentioned by Su-Yun just now was a 2nd-year graduate student, Li Wei, Zhou Piao and another boy were 1st-year graduate students, and Tang Yiqi was only a senior student. They may be able to do the questions on paper easily, but their practical experience is almost zero. So, Su-Yun guided and corrected them at the same time, and time passed by. A few hours later, Su-Yun exhaled a long breath and looked at his watch. It was 11:30 in the afternoon. The preparatory process he formulated this time had a total of 22 steps. After a morning, the research team dragged their feet to the step of nickel acetate sodium borohydride catalytic hydrogenation, with a completion rate of about 36%. According to this progress, the progress may be pulled to about 60% today. If they are lucky tomorrow, they may be able to complete all the preparatory work. The laboratory has a usage period of 2 weeks, which means that Su-Yun can use it for about 12 days to tackle the synthesis. This is a little faster than he expected. After all, the task reward is the formula of the 5th generation of imidacloprid. Su-Yun is now working on the 4th generation, except for the cyclization idea, and almost every step depends on his own efforts. Then he quickly scanned the laboratory and found that all links had almost entered the observation period. He coughed lightly and said, "Okay, everyone stop what you are doing and have lunch before continuing. Lao Chu, you should show your style and stay in the laboratory for a shift. I will take a few junior students to Meiguang for a meal and replace you after the work is done." As the deputy of the research team and one of the only 2 doctoral students on the scene, Chiu Sheng is the most suitable person on duty. Therefore, he nodded very readily when he heard it. "Understood, you can go and eat without worry, and leave the laboratory to me. After determining the person on duty, the group changed into regular clothes according to the experimental rules and walked towards Meiguang of USTC under the leadership of Su Yun. The so-called Meiguang refers to the abbreviation of food court, which is also a very famous food gathering point around USTC. In his previous life, Su Yun studied a regular undergraduate course. The uncle of a classmate of the same major opened a barbecue restaurant near the Meiguang University, and her boyfriend was in the field of plants and animals. So every week, he and his roommate would steal a few rabbits from the laboratory, and drag his girlfriend and her roommate to the barbecue restaurant to get fire and seasoning. In the end, 6 of the 8 people in the 2 dormitories became lovers. This tradition continued until Su Yun graduated. As a result, it was heard that a funny guy accidentally brought out a rabbit that had taken medicine, and finally a group of people had diarrhea and went to the hospital. Since then, the laboratories of the University of Science and Technology have been much stricter. Su Yun and his group chatted and laughed like this, and finally arrived in front of a grilled fish restaurant. I don't know when it started, but many grilled fish restaurants for single people have appeared in the local area, and the average cost per person is less than 30 yuan, which is really friendly for office workers or social phobia. After entering the store, Su Yun and the other 6 people each ordered their favorite flavors, and then sat down and swiped their phones. There is no way, this is the standard social mode of contemporary young people, and they can't live without their phones. Tang Yiqiu and Zhou Piao are typical melon-eating parties. After opening Weibo, they immediately locked onto the hot search list. The poster of the 3 mice has been overturned. I quite like their snacks. Didn't the comments below say that this is a poster from 2019, and it is now being used to stir up trouble? What? So it has been causing trouble since 2019? Well, it seems that what you said is not wrong. Look at this again. The new book of Kidian.com writer newbie fisherman failed, and he fainted at home due to hunger. Isn't this too pitiful? Looking at the several junior students who were talking nonsense, Su Yun couldn't help but smile. He actually liked the atmosphere of a group of people chattering, but unfortunately after graduation, various pressures and practical problems came one after another, resulting in the fact that gatherings between colleagues no longer had this flavor. I still miss the days without intrigue. At this moment, Li Wei on the side suddenly let out a long hum, said, "Everyone, look at the 8th hot search, isn't this funny?" Li Wei's words immediately attracted the attention of everyone at the table. Seeing that several people had not downloaded Weibo, Li Wei directly turned his phone over and displayed the content page. Look, Xiao Zhao, who was closest to him, immediately came forward and repeated while reading, Newton portrait, and tack. What kind of hot search is this? Li Wei smiled when he heard it. A very famous British collector just passed away. Before his death, he donated all his collections to the British Museum. Today the museum held an entry ceremony and invited a bunch of media to visit. Among them was a portrait of Newton, which was said to be painted in 1701. As a result, someone saw a pair of sneakers on the table behind the portrait. Sneakers? Li Wei nodded vigorously, his mouth opened even wider. Yes, it looks like Inta's winter model this year. Some people say that Newton is a Chinese time traveler, and some people accuse Inta of malicious marketing, but the problem is that Inta had just withdrawn from BCI when Zhuzhou Cotton was launched, and the broadcaster of the entry ceremony was still BXC. It is impossible for them to cooperate in such a thing. Zhou Piao thought for a while and asked, "Is it possible that the domestic marketing account made up the news?" Li Wei shook his head. "Impossible. Some junior students in the school who are studying abroad have talked about this. I heard that foreign media are going crazy. No matter what the final outcome of this matter is, John Bull has lost face. Don't you think so, Su Shen?" Facing Li Wei's inquiry, Su Yun mechanically hummed, as if 1,000 ears were jumping in his heart. The sneakers in the portrait, is this the Easter egg from the reward? What happened in the copy, actually reflected in reality. Chapter 50 Mysterious Sneakers. In the grilled fish restaurant. After simply perfunctorily dealing with Li Wei, Su Yun leaned against the wall, took out his mobile phone, and directly opened Weibo. As expected, just after entering the hot search list and scanning a few lines, he saw the hot search topics mentioned by Li Wei, Newton's portrait, and Tan. At this time, the hot search ranking has dropped to 8th, below Slow Motion in the Snow, and above it is Walking on Stilts box office. Su Yun couldn't help but shake his head slightly. After all, Weibo is more entertaining in nature, and the brand name behind it is probably ignored by some users as an advertisement, resulting in this topic, which is bound to jump to the top one in the physics circle, being in a state of neither up nor down on social media. Then Soo-yoon slid the screen a few times, selected a first release media and clicked it, and found that the content of the blog post was 2 pictures taken from a foreign media, with a long paragraph of Chinese characters on it. According to the British underworld TV station BXC, the famous British collector Bellum Brisson died of liver cancer last Monday. In his will, he donated all of his more than 80 collections to the British Museum. The donation ceremony started at 2000 hours yesterday, Yanjing time. More than 50 media outlets were present to interview and broadcast the ceremony, with an actual attendance of more than 200 people. The portrait of Newton that has caused heated discussion is collection number 34. A reporter from Al Jazeera discovered when taking photos that a pair of modern-style sneakers was painted on a table behind Newton in the painting. This situation immediately aroused doubts from some of the media present. Some reporters raised the view that the portrait might be a modern processing on the spot, but the director of the British Museum, Zamislo Mills, said that as one of the 4 largest museums in the world, the British Museum has conducted accurate age analysis on each piece of work in the museum. He can guarantee that this portrait was painted by the famous painter Esved in the late 17th century, and he presented the appraisal report on the spot. Many internationally renowned experts also analyzed the portrait on site, and finally unanimously determined that it was the original work of Esved. The expert group included 2 well-known scholars from the China Academy of Fine Arts, Atkafa Chen Yiping and Atkafa Gu Guangtao, but Zamisro Mills also admitted that the museum had never found this pair of suspected modern sneakers in many previous identification tests. It seemed that it appeared in the portrait overnight. Then Soo-yoon clicked on the picture in the blog post to enlarge it and looked at it carefully. The protagonist of the portrait is the old cow in his later years. There is a significant difference in temperament and appearance between him and the young cow, but the shadow of the young man who loves reason can still be vaguely seen from the corners of his eyebrows and the contours of his facial features. The old cow in the picture is wearing a luxurious blue dress, holding a holy book in his arms, and looking forward with a solemn expression. Behind the old cow, you can see the fireplace, reclining chair and other furniture facilities, and on the table behind his right hand, you can vaguely see the side of a pair of sneakers. Soo-yoon was very familiar with this pair of sneakers. He had bought them from a physical store for 328 yuan, which was the pair that Xiaoniu had taken away. It was obvious. Under the influence of some special power, part of his experience in the parallel time and space was reflected in the local history. If nothing unexpected happened, this should be the rewarded Easter egg. How to say it? After experiencing things like rebirth and time travel, Soo-yoon's acceptance of this kind of situation is already very high. Therefore, rather than saying that he was shocked, it is better to say that he had a hint of joy in his heart, or sense of excitement that only I know the truth. While Soo-yoon's mind was stirring, several younger students beside him were also expressing their opinions. I think the possibility of coincidence is more likely. The speaker was the last boy among the 5 who had not been introduced. His name was Ren Yonkin, and he was also Xiao Zhao's classmate and roommate. He was currently a first-year graduate student. I remember that brogues in the 17th century had straps, right? Maybe it was just a whim of Mr. Neo who modified a pair of shoes? After all, portraits are not cameras. With some coincidences, they might just happen to match the shoes. Hearing this, Tang Yikyu shook her head and pointed at the photo and said, "Senior Ren, we are all science students, and our thinking should not be too emotional. To be honest, how likely do you think this is? Look here, there is a small amount of black between the red and white uppers, which is exactly the same as the shoes. This situation is really too difficult to describe as coincidence." "That's right." Jo Piao at the side puffed up her cheeks and helped, then pointed at Tang Yikyu's bowl and said, "Jiu, can you have a beef ball? I don't have this in my side dishes. I'll exchange it with you for a trivet." "It's Kyu. Bah, it's Yikyu," Tang Yikyu argued softly, and reluctantly picked up a beef ball for Jo Piao. "Senior sister, be careful, I want something super spicy, you may not be used to it." Jo Piao smiled and reached into the hat behind Tang Yikyu's down jacket, rubbing it non-stop. "I know, you are from Zhuangzi, you use chili water to brush your teeth." Seeing the relationship between several juniors gradually getting closer, Soo-yoon's face also showed a hint of joy. Although the character of Li Wei and the other 5 is beyond doubt, those with bad reputation and no ability will not be able to pass Soo-yoon's preliminary review. But if a team wants to move forward smoothly, it is meaningless to talk about personal ability alone, and the tacit understanding between each other must be in place. At least they cannot be strangers throughout the whole process. Originally, Soo-yoon wanted to use this meal as an icebreaker, and guide the atmosphere so that everyone would be less restrained. He was quite experienced in this kind of thing. He had been to many banquets in his previous life, and even if he just watched, he could learn something. Unexpectedly, before he opened his mouth, this trending search on Weibo gave everyone a chance to get to know each other. After several discussions and speculations, the 5 people were obviously much more familiar with each other. Especially Jo Pio, who is almost having an affair with Tang Yikyu. When I have time, I will take them to a barbecue, and the interpersonal relationships in the temporary research group will be almost completely finalized. Afterwards, everyone chatted for a while, and after eating and drinking, Soo-yoon paid the bill. After walking out of the store, Soo-yoon was about to greet everyone to go back to the laboratory, but before he could say anything, he suddenly felt a chill in his heart. He hesitated for a few seconds, then said to Li Wei, the only second-year graduate student among the 5, Zio Li, you take Zio Tang, Zio Zhao and the others back to the laboratory first. I still have some procedures to run with Director Tian. Before I go back, you should follow Lao Chu's instructions. You can contact me at any time if there is any situation. I will be back before 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Li Wei nodded. No problem, Master Su, you go and do your work. Is there anything else you want me to pass on? No, be careful during the experiment, okay? After separating from Li Wei and the others, Soo-yoon hurried back to his home, locked the door, and entered the claustrophobic space. At this moment, the number displayed on the door representing the 1665 copy was 3 for 100. If you have any interesting black technology ideas, you can also leave a message. Don't leave too big ones. Feel free to write down your messages. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.